Go ahead.
Hey, sorry. I was just wondering if
Static picture.
Okay.
But how? That's because you're sticking the clavicle J, okay?
Well, it shouldn't be that far
But it
down if
sticks
you're
out
doing
here.
it. What about here? What would be what would be?
I mean,
I guess we'll go ahead and get started. Hey Courtney, how you doing, John? Go ahead and call the meeting to order here, and I guess we need to establish a quorum, so we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, plus I believe we have some on the line, is
Yes,
that right?
Dr. Smith and Dick are also on the line. Oh, and Mr. Adams.
So we have a full house. Okay, very good. So guys, the guys that are in by, is this a conference call or Zoom, or can they see, or?
They're looking right at you right now.
Oh, sorry. about that. Maybe turn that to
Whoever's speaking.
Dr. Dunn or Michelle, somebody. But anyway, put your sunglasses on. But anyway, if you can't hear or whatever, I can't see you, so please just be vociferous and speak up and say, hey, and we'll circle back around to you. I don't want to lose you part of the way through, or make sure that you can hear. With that being said, let's see, so we do have quorum, Liz.
Yes, sir.
And I guess the first order of business is to approve the February 25th meeting minutes, which seems like for eternity ago. So can I get a motion to accept or discuss?
Mr. Adams.
Could I recommend one amendment? It's just a little on page 5 on the EMS subcommittee report. The second to the last sentence on it talks about an RFP. It really was an RFI. So we sent out something for a request for information. instead of a request
Thank you for that clarification.
It does make a little bit.
It does.
And with that, I would second the motion to approve.
Okay. Any other amendments or changes, concerns? Thank you, Courtney. Okay, all those in favor, and I think since we have learned to do this the Zoom way, so I think I'll just continue that. If there are any opposition or no votes, we'll take those, and that way it's easier for you with the minutes. Okay. Any no votes? Okay, that's unanimous, so the minutes are approved. As far as the chairman report, I just have 2 or 3 things. I'd like to thank all the stakeholders that are working in the subcommittees. There's a lot of work going on, not just at this table here. This is really just sort of where people come together and we go over things, but there's a tremendous amount of work going on. Each of you are involved in some way. There's stakeholders that are, many stakeholders that are not on the commission that are participating in all these meetings, from EMS to GQIP to the Georgia COT. I've been a part of some of those, obviously not all of them. And it's amazing the amount of work that's going on. And that will eventually percolate up through, dissemination of information to the commission. So just stay tuned. There's a lot of work going on, and I appreciate everybody's efforts. I think we're finally coming out of COVID, and the committees are really working hard. So a lot of good things are headed our way, I think, over the next year. I'd also like to acknowledge Liz as being chair-elect for the Trauma Center Association of America for the Trauma Systems Committee. So that's a really big deal. It's a national organization that many of the trauma centers are members of, that support our trauma centers and trauma system. And being the chair of that systems committee, elevates Georgia to where we're on the cutting edge, and we have a say in what goes on. Plus, looks good for all the stakeholders in Georgia. So, congratulations, Liz. Liz also serves as the Society of Trauma Nurses representative to the National COT, which is the American College of Surgeons, and is involved with the Trauma Systems Committee there. I had been involved with that committee. I've since rotated off the national committee, but I remain as the region chief of the Southeast region. So it's good for Georgia to be represented at that level. And if there's any other individuals, we like to, the Society of Nurses representative to the National COT, which is the American College of Surgeons, and is involved with the Trauma Systems Committee there. Is that my brother?
That's your
That's
twin.
your twin brother. That's my evil twin. That was strange. So it's a playback. Okay, so anyway, if there's any other individuals that are on committees, please let us know. I'd like to acknowledge everyone and keep everybody abreast as to how we're interconnected, because you never know when we might need to call one of those committees and get information or guidance. So it's good to be connected. So with that being said, I think Liz has some updates from the executive director position, and then we'll move into her report. So Liz, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. And I'm proud to represent, so to speak, for the TCAA Systems Committee. And there's a lot of talk about what the strategic plan looks like moving forward. Some of that is around system metrics, as we all know, who are enamored with that time to definitive care metric, that, there's a lot of other things we kind of need to look at. So hopefully through the work of that committee, we can kind of define those things. So, and I do want to thank those on the active there's so much subcommittee work going on right now. For those of you who are chairing and doing the work on those subcommittees, we are so grateful for that work, because it's really what pushes out what the strategic initiatives are here for the commission. Just a couple of quick operational updates. Happy, sad news. For one, Katie, who's actually joining us virtually, so that she can attend her daughter's graduation today. She's been promoted to finance operations officer. That more accurately reflects her sort of pseudo CFO role with us, if you will, and more reflects what her day-to-day duties are. And then unfortunately, tomorrow is Erin's last day with us, and to sort of send her off in a big way, we do have a little cake in the back, so we're not allowed to have food here, but what the heck. We gotta do. So please join us after the meeting for some cake to send Erin off, and we will certainly miss her. She's kind of the glue that's held these meetings together. So let's see.
Sometimes.
Well, this is a hard group to hold together, right? And then I think if Erin has it up on your screen, the super speeder revenues, this has remained pretty constant, and it's in your book. There's no real changes. I know at the last meeting we had talked about fireworks excise tax, if Katie and I could work to get better breakdown, and that's like tight, like Fort Knox tight. Like we're not able to penetrate that. They don't give us that until the end of the year when the total sum comes in, because as you know, by code, there's certain percentages that are defined to go different places. So Katie and I are working to kind of crack that, but it might take us a minute. So, and then of course we have that enabling legislation awaiting the governor's signature, so that we can find out, will that impact our base budget and then amended true up, or are we to expect the same sort of base and then amended true up? We'd certainly love to get more of it up front because it's more efficient to spend that way. But we'll certainly take it any way we can have access to it. And then just so for those of you who might not be aware, it is All Awareness Month, and yesterday is actually Trauma Survivors Day. I'm hoping that next year we can partner with Lori and Cheryl, and we can kind of make it big for Trauma Survivors Day. I mean, that's the work that we're most proud of, is the people who, who we put back right again after traumatic events. So we look forward to, in this sort of transition from COVID era, to being able to do some in-person stuff. And then I've included in your package the Warren Averett uncompensated care audit results. It is actually final now. There were no changes to that. It's quite a long report, and I'm not going to go through it, but since some of the commissioners are newer in your tenure and you may not be familiar, Jessica is willing to come back in August and run through that with you so you can kind of understand it. It's pretty standard. The results are, the methodology that's used is really sound. The centers, they know what to expect when they come out and look for cases and determine how claims are met. Yes, ma'am.
Perhaps it might be beneficial for Jessica to attend one of the administrator committee meetings, because I think it'd be very valuable for the administrators at the centers to understand the process of how uncompensated care is adjudicated and validated at the different centers. not that she could come here too, but that some of the administrators may not be aware. I'm sure they're not.
Yeah. I think that's a great idea, and that sort of ties into my vision of the administrative group. We really need them involved and to understand, because there's a lot that happens in their trauma center that I don't think they quite understand, because they're busy and they have a lot of things on their plate. So by having Jessica talk to them, I think that would really help them understand how important finances are in the way that we do it. So that would be very helpful. And then I think there's several commissions, back when we came up with all this, I mean, it's very tight. It can withstand, scrutiny, if it's ever audited, how we do things, because it's put together by accountants. And so it's a very tight process. So I think the commission members that are new, certainly, and maybe some that have been here a while that just don't remember all the details, because it is fairly complex. I think we should have a presentation on that. So I would love for Jessica to come back and present how we do it, how we, so all the commission members can, if they're asked by a legislator, how do you know that your dollars are following code and that they're well spent and that you can validate it? And we have a process.
And they have asked, so it is important for us.
Yeah, so I would like them to know this. So that would be good.
And just to the methodology between the inability to collect on it and then the severity level, it really does reflect what a center burden is. So
Yeah.
it is, when I walk through it, I'm kind of amazed because it's been the same formula now for a while, but it works.
Yeah. And you're not just taking center's word for it. Anybody can make a mistake, and as we found over the years with turnover, and Jessica picks up on those. I mean, she, let's scrub that data again. Let's look back. This looks like an outlier, and they go back through the data and then they resubmit. So there's a good process. We should take credit for that.
And thanks for mentioning the turnover, Dr. Ashley, because Jessica said that she would create an implementation to uncompensated care program so that as folks, move in and out of that trauma program manager or registry role, they'll be informed when they come in so that they don't just get this email in February.
Yeah, that would be great. That was my concern, is there's so much turnover right now in the trauma programs throughout the country that
Right.
even at the administrator level in the C-suite, we really need a regular orientation program to be helpful.
It would be good too if she could you made me think of it when you mentioned it. When we first started, there were lots of errors. Remember, we went back and forth. How do we define it? What's included? What's not included? It would be really interesting to see if she could do a high-level summary of when we first began, how many errors there were and what we found.
And she has that.
Versus now, because
Yeah.
it is pretty tight. I mean, it's been a learning curve and an improvement in this, at the center level that was initiated at the state level.
Mhm.
So I think that would be really good to show, because it's return on investment of what we do at the center level.
And I think if we, again, keep the administrators closely involved, then when people call and ask questions, the PI coordinator, the TPM, or the director, they'll understand, oh, this is important. I need to support this.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay. And also, I just want to, besides the subcommittees and stakeholder groups that are very busy, just highlight a lot of success going on on the RTAC level. I've been attending all of the meetings. Gina's attending a lot of the meetings, so we can, as we embark upon our statewide risk adjusted efforts, Gina can kind of infuse those through the regional level. That'll be really important moving forward so that we can support regional performance improvement activities. And then finally, so that I don't have to stand on the corner in Atlanta and hand out our annual reports, please take some back to your agencies, facilities, or whatever. Share the great work that's going on at the commission. They're on the front table there. And I think that wraps it up. I'll turn it back over to you, Chairman Ashley.
Okay. All right, why don't we move into the subcommittee and work group reports, and we'll start with the bylaws work group. Michelle?
Yes, thank you, sir. We met again on Monday, so just a few updates, and we can anticipate that at our August meeting, you'll receive information prior to, so that we can vote on the bylaws changes. There'll be some verbiage changes around standing subcommittees, and work groups, and kind of delineating what those are. as well as who needs to be a chair of that. I think the decision was made that the budget subcommittee needs to have a GTC chair, but that needs to be within this group, but not everything needs to have a GTC chair, that we can enable or empower other folks within the community, within the trauma community, to be able to participate on those. So that's one. Also changing or renewing to every 3 years, because reality is by the time we finish this, we're 9 months into this year, we're doing this all over again. So that kind of matches what the tenure is for some of the chair positions, and that way we've got some consistency there. Making November our kind of reorientation to the bylaws, I think even the uncompensated care conversations, making sure that all of us as commission members thoroughly understand our roles, responsibilities, and what that means, particularly as those of us that are new that come on, and using that time kind of as a brief orientation, recenter, as you know, SB 60, all of those things to make sure everybody has that information. Dr. Medeiros, Mr. Atkins, anything from you all that were on the call that I forgot?
I do have a question, Michelle.
Yes, sir.
So the subcommittees,
Mhm.
that's a little bit of a change in what we've done before without having somebody on the commission chair that committee.
Mhm.
And so I think if that's the move going forward, I think we're going to need to make sure that if there's something that the commission needs to vote on or approve, that we're going to need that well in advance so that we could talk about it and kind of muddle through it rather than just have a presentation and then take a vote on it without having to think through it.
Absolutely. Very good point.
In the past, when there's been a chair, we've been able to communicate through back channels, hey, this and this has come up for a vote. What do you guys think about it? Well, that's going to be like, we don't have a lot of time to think about it.
Well, I think absolutely, and I wrote that down as a note. Part of it though was that we may not chair it, but there would probably be a member on it, so that one of us would
Okay.
still participate, but we weren't on the onus of actually having to chair the committee and drive that.
Okay.
But no, absolutely, I'll write that down because I think if for some reason that doesn't happen,
And we made that change because we're out of compliance with our current bylaws with the committees we have already. So, and there's only 9 of us, and it would stretch us pretty thin as the work of the subcommittees and work groups are becoming more robust. And we are really getting a lot done in the state. It's just, I think we talked about, and obviously these aren't coming up for a vote. This
right,
is-
it's just
we're-
conversation.
have to-
The problem that I see from it, kind of like Dr. Dunn's concern is if you have a work group out there doing work and they have something they want us to vote on, they don't have they come make a motion. They
No,
can come make a
absolutely.
presentation and then somebody here can make a motion. If you got somebody who's already, maybe they're not the chair, but they're signed to that as a liaison, then they could actually make the motion.
Although it doesn't say that in our bylaws. It doesn't say our motions can only be made. I don't know if that's a Robert's Rules thing, but it doesn't, it is, okay. So I think,
Does Courtney just make these up, by the way, or
no,
not?
he's not, no.
There's a
no.
whole book, I know, that
There's
he
a
gave us the
whole
whole
book, and we
book.
have a cheat sheet, but
I got it
I
in my
think-
truck.
I think, it's probably best, Michelle, to send it out to the group. The other thing, I was gonna talk to you offline, but since Courtney brought it up, I do think we probably need to put in there that business is conducted according to Robert's Rules, so we have structure.
Mhm.
And we'll have to think through that with the committee reporting that we get. Yeah, we have to just make sure that people who are chairs are oriented to what it is. Each subcommittee will have a charter and goals and expectations as set forth, because basically what'll happen is we'll determine a work group or a subcommittee is needed. And then they'll get a charge from the chair that will appoint who it's gonna be the driver or the leader with this is how you function, this is the goals we want, and then this is the reporting time frame, so that when it comes back, it's a very formalized, structured process. It was just like the GCTE group. Very rarely, it's not chaired by a commission member, and we wanted to come into compliance, and there may be other, like if they come up with an art committee, perhaps, I don't know if we're going to, but there's other committees out there that won't be commission chaired, so we've got to come up with some mechanism to keep the. work
Probably the
going.
GCTE was the one that comes to the top of my mind as an outlier, because when Elaine France was here, she was there, she chaired it.
Mhm.
But then like now, the chairs of GCTE are not on the commission, so, but they're a vital part of the the commission and the community, so we have to have them represented. So trying to make it line up in the bylaws to where it meets our needs.
So one of the other things that, at least at one point in time, I don't know if they still do, but the GTCE had their own bylaws. And if there's gonna be a subcommittee for this committee, then they can't have a bylaws that conflicts with these bylaws.
It was
So
tagged.
they may want to have, they may want to be an outlier.
They don't have their own bylaws. So it was TAG that did, which did but then when they dissolved, it's gone. So GCTE functions as a subcommittee of the commission.
I think the other piece that we have on this that we had discussion about was formulating a list of all the standing subcommittees, work groups, making sure that the processes are consistent. We have charters, we have purpose, expected outcomes, so that we all know exactly what that is, which then we can feed into as new work groups, standing subcommittees come up. We can then make sure that those chairs understand what that process is to report out on. So that you will all receive this well in advance. I have the emails typed up along with the verbiage changes, so we'll have time to discuss way before the meeting.
Yeah,
And please, if there's
sounds
any
like
other
nighttime
feedback.
reading. It
Yeah.
sounds like a lot of nighttime reading.
Yes, absolutely. Very good.
Well, I think you can see from the discussion, this is, it was time. That's why it's in there to review it every so often. And we've grown big enough now. We need to fine tune things. So I appreciate you all being willing to do that, because it's an art to put all that together. All right, Michelle, anything else?
No, sir, that's it. Thank you.
Okay. All right, how about the budget subcommittee report, Dr. McDaniel?
Thank you, Dr. Ashley. Welcome, everybody. Happy EMS week for those of you that are doing the EMS well. We appreciate everything that you do. And in celebration of that, I have to brag about our new helicopter.
Mhm.
So you guys have your inaugural flight T-shirts. I'll toss them your way. You guys want to take them? Talk about that. It's got the bag. So, and today is National Stop the Bleed Day as well, so we should have put tourniquets at everybody's. We did not, so please, I have a bag where we can trade off sizes. I just put those out there with the little blue ribbons up for you, but we wanted to share that. We're excited. It should have should be airborne in June. They're doing training and touchdowns and takeoffs, and they're training the flight crew and everything. So we're kind of excited about that.
Will
But
that be system dependent for just y'all, or will it also be
anybody,
911 type stuff?
yeah,
Okay, transfer.
because I think they're gonna fly burns too, as far as I know, yeah.
Fly what?
Burn patients. They were taking pictures on the top of the new building yesterday.
Yeah, yesterday they landed in front of the new burn tower and the burn pad. For promotion. For the tower, so.
Is that the Steel Burn Center you're talking about?
It's the big, Scottish, big clamshell back. Loud, goes by my window.
So this is Augusta, basically your shop's helicopter service, right?
Yes, yes.
Is
It's
it just
Air
based
Care.
right there, or are they based? at
So
other
they're
places?
based at the Bushfield at the airport. They built a hangar there. They house the crew. There's a kitchen, sleeping quarters for the crew, and a training room that we're going to use because there's parking. And there's 2 hangars, I believe, one large enough for the helicopter and theoretically one large enough for a fixed wing. But we'll
Mhm.
see.
Okay.
It's big enough to house one. I don't know what the plan is, but I was told they could house a fixed wing or 2 helicopters, so it's pretty big. And they'll be housed out there at Bushfield, so it's easy access to get to. Yeah. We shall see. Doesn't fall under my department, so I'm very happy about that. So the budget subcommittee, as you know, has been meeting monthly, and much to their dismay, will probably continue to be monthly, because I think we're making a lot of strides with changing processes and being more transparent with the reporting. And it makes this day a lot easier, because a lot of these numbers that you're seeing are not new numbers. They're things that you've seen before, except for the reallocation plan. As you guys well know, due to COVID, there were a lot of unrealized or unspent dollars because we weren't able to have meetings, hold meetings and so forth. So there was a fair bit of funding that needed to be reallocated. And at the last meeting, we did say that we would bring you a proposal to vote on for reallocation of the dollars that Katie was able to identify. So on page 41 in your books is that reallocation plan. It covers the major categories of where the dollars will be spent. And then you'll see there's 104,000, a little over $104,000 remaining. And what the budget subcommittee is proposing is that we would utilize those dollars to purchase additional ABLS units. I understand through our conversations and Liz's conversations with Tim that those are getting a little harder to come by because of the supply chain disruptions. And in the long run, will be a cost savings for us to upgrade these units. So we'd like to upgrade as many units as we can. And we also want to utilize it to purchase training supplies for our Stop the Bleed training throughout the state. They've gotten pretty worn out. We've not replaced any of that equipment for quite some time. So the RTACs and hospitals will get training equipment. So that's what those remaining dollars, we didn't have an exact figure to distribute. It's going to depend. So we would like to bring forth a motion to the commission to approve the repurpose and reallocation spending as you have in your packets.
It's also up there.
Yes, and for those in Cyberland, it is also up on the screen for you to look at. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, right there.
At page 41.
Was that the official motion or do we need to make a motion?
No, that right? That was the official
That-
motion.
yeah, so
See,
then
I'm
I-
trainable.
I am okay with seconding that motion.
Mr. Chairman, you can open it up for discussion if there's any.
Please.
Most of the budget subcommittee's here today,
It's good to have a second, but doesn't require a second.
right? That's right. I remember that.
Yeah.
Have a second.
Never hurts. Never hurts.
Okay, well, I don't hear a lot of discussion, so I'm gonna call a vote then. And again, we'll do it the easy way. Any opposed, vote no. You like that, Aaron? Makes it easy on you. Okay. Whose voice was that? Okay, the motion carries.
All right, thank you. Also from the budget subcommittee, we need to bring forth the FY '22 spend plan. Again, these are not new numbers for you to see. There's very little change from the previous year's budget to this year's budget. There's some slight line items of increased costs due to having to do web hosting and hybrid hosting and so forth, but the overall buckets are on page 42. And the overall spend plan by categories on page 42 for you to look at, with the detail on page 43, if anybody has any questions about that. So I'd like to make a motion on behalf of the budget subcommittee to approve the FY '22 budget and spend plan.
And actually, you can just bring that forward.
I did.
So we're good. You don't, I mean, what I mean, you don't need a second. You bring it as the chairs. Okay, any discussion on the spend plan? Okay, I'll call for vote. All those opposed, any opposed? Okay, Aaron, that passes.
All right. What is that next in the packet? Something. Okay, I'm not sure if that was it or the work group. All right, so the final voting item from the budget subcommittee is the performance-based payment criteria. We went back to it. But what you have in your packets in the following pages is the performance-based payment criteria for level 1s, 2s, 3s, 4s, and burn centers. It is essentially equivalent to what it was in the prior year with some minor upgrades and changes highlighted in blue in your packets. So I'll give you a minute just to glance at those to be sure nobody has any questions related to those. And then following that, I'd like to bring forth on behalf of the budget subcommittee to approve the performance-based payment criteria for the upcoming fiscal year.
No, just look it over. We added, I would just want to say Gina did a lot of work on trying to make like a point system. So it's not like a binary all or nothing and you got credit, but in the end, the percentages equal your percent at risk. So this was just cleaner. We just couldn't make it happen at the last minute. And the only thing we really added is, in the spirit of getting everybody together and trying to get the world group face to face, is that we want everybody twice a year together at that St. Simon Summer, and then the administrators group can meet. We can make those, like, that's when the whole system is together twice a year, spring and August. So we made the summer meeting required for everybody. And then we added the participation for level 3, level 4. We want the 3s and 4s to participate in the readiness cost survey, or we won't be able to accurately reflect what it costs to do trauma care in the level 3s and 4s. So
I don't think this is very burdensome. I think this helps the system, helps the hospitals, actually. And we can all do it, so.
we eliminated the percent risk in the burn regional education, just because, again, COVID efforts hampered some of that, and we wanted to keep the total at-risk dollars the same and not increase anything this year. So with adding that required meeting at the spring meeting, we didn't want to create more jeopardy there. So everybody, you're impacting somebody's budget when you change what they are.
And just to clarify, in the past, we had required at the spring and this summer meetings that the PI coordinators and or registrars were mandated to be there. That's no longer a requirement, or not a requirement currently, right?
It's not.
It's not a
Non-requirement.
requirement.
TMD or equivalent.
Yeah, and
TPM,
TPM.
or designate.
Okay. All right,
TPM,
that's what it says.
TMD, or designate.
Okay, thank you.
It is probably beneficial at some point for us to consider the PI coordinators if we get more into the PI and process measures and things like that. But right now, it's not.
With the TMD and the TPM.
Or, and or designate.
And or designate.
And in level 4s, whoever the medical director is overseeing the trauma piece, because it's not going to be a surge in these cases.
Michelle, this would be a good thing to, we're sort of loading you up, but
You'll hear about it shortly. We're already planning.
to have that at your meeting as well, because this, you can see this really lining up with the administrators group. Now, we got a lot of things to show them, and so I'm excited about that.
Absolutely.
And Dr. Ashley, Michelle and I also talked about just the value of that methodology around uncompensated care and how it is calculated, and then it impacts your prospective payment. We want to go to that for PDP too. That'll allow the hospitals to better plan for the money that they're going to get, instead of at the end of the year, you get an amended contract that says you lost money. Ultimately, you're net gaining, because we give trauma centers extra money through the amended process when we get the amended budget, but it just would be cleaner, and we'll work through the administrators group to make that happen.
So your assessment for this year would impact your readiness money that you get in the upcoming fiscal year, as opposed to at the last minute of the existing fiscal year.
There
Just
wouldn't
makes
be
more
the
sense.
rush with scorecards and all that,
Right.
trying to get that.
Yeah.
Okay, makes sense. All right, so we need to vote on that one?
Yes, we do.
Okay. Call to vote. Any opposition, any no votes? Have to give a little extra time to the people on Zoom, make sure they can unmute. All right, hearing none, that's unanimous. Aaron? Motion passes.
And we, with the budget subcommittee, is going to work on drafting some guidelines to help us that would require full commission vote to be able to make some not independent decisions, but decisions throughout the year, since we meet monthly for reallocation of dollars, that we would like the commission to consider not requiring a full commission vote. So having Courtney on there, and you sit on there too, it'll help make sure that we are compliant with the rules. But something, for example, of if we find that there's an area where we have underspending, we would like to be able to move funding around within a approved initiative in support of that if it comes up. And sometimes it's hard if we have to wait, because we only meet quarterly for a full commission vote. So we will write all of that down, so it'll be very clear, it'll be limited as to what we could do, but we'll try to get that together to propose to the commission for a vote at the August meeting. And then the last thing is just, I brought this, we did an update at the last commission meeting, so we haven't done any more work, but we've got a work group that's looking at grants and contracts. That work group has evaluated all the current grants and contracts, and they would like to, we're gonna get together again, hopefully in July, and we'll be looking at what's a grant, what's a contract, do they align with the strategic plan, yes or no? What are the deliverables, and how does it enhance and support the commission as a whole and the vision of the commission? And they may make some recommendations for appropriations to the budget subcommittee then to take forth to the commission related to the amount of funding that each entity receives. So all of the entities are being reviewed that we currently have grants and contracts with.
And that's coming up in August. We'll get that too.
So hopefully we'll meet again in July. We'll have to make some recommendations, yes, for that. We've had our preliminary meeting, and I'll have to say, and again, I brought this up last time, but I can't speak enough how much I appreciated Dr. Smith and Dr. Wallace this time spent reviewing the contracts that they were assigned to look at. So I appreciate that. They did a lot of heavy lifting with that and looking at it, and coming up with some recommendations and suggestions. I think it's going to be good.
Good.
I yield the floor back to the chair. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for your report. Excellent. So now we'll move into the EMS subcommittee report. Courtney?
So you've got a report in front of you. I'm gonna briefly go over these things and be tickled to answer questions if anybody's got any. The ABLS system, the good news is that we've been able to put, particularly with the additional funding that we voted on today, pretty good bit of money into replacing the outdated equipment. Some of that stuff is 10 years old and technologies have changed a bunch. I don't know that we'll get exactly where we need to be, but we'll certainly get within rock throwing distance, I think, of where we need to be replacing those older units. We still have several counties in Georgia who have not taken advantage of it. It's kind of frustrating, but talking to some of them, their broadband capabilities in those rural areas are such that they haven't seen a real need for it. Very hard to get to. The learning management system, we did meet. We sent out an RFI, and we sent it out to CAPC, is the group that on a national basis accredits EMS continuing education units. So we were concerned about how we would identify people who did this type of training. So we just went to that website, and everybody who was CAPC approved, we sent them a request for information. We received 14 responses back. We've got those, and Aaron was kind enough to compile those for us. They've been sent out to the committee that we've got looking at it, and we're going to meet next week virtually to start going through those things to help design now an RFP. And quite frankly, I didn't have the expertise to develop an RFP because I didn't know what the capabilities were. These folks now have told us what their capabilities are, so we can look and see if there's a capability here that we may want that we would put in the RFP.
Yeah, so Courtney, just refresh me on the LMS. Is that a system to track the current training for all the paramedics and EMS personnel, so we know where everyone's at and where we want them to get to? Is that what that purpose is?
This one per se, we might be able to put that into the RFP that we can track it externally. But what this would do is give them developing a system like this is pretty difficult, particularly when you start trying to develop content to put in it. And these folks do it as a business.
What's the purpose of that? What are you trying to accomplish?
When you're trying to look at the capability of folks getting training, and particularly specific training, is in rural areas is pretty difficult. This would give a lot of folks a lot of capabilities to get. I think one of those has something like 400 different classes. What my goal would be is to look at it eventually on a statewide basis and work with the individual services and their performance improvement people so that we can say, hey, this is trauma month. Okay, why don't we get your folks to do 4 hours on trauma this month? And we would provide that for them through this mechanism. So I don't have a clue what this kind of stuff may cost. This would also give them, because it's CAPC, they would automatically get their CEU approved. We have the capability, or we would put in the capability that if Manual County wanted to sit down and do an online platform, it would have a piece in there that I could put my information on there, based on my cardiac monitor or my ventilator or whatever. I'm really looking forward to seeing how much money they're talking about. The way we sent out the RFI, we told them we'd be looking at 3 different prices. One price that we would just focus on the folks who are 911 EMS people, because that's the trauma folks, that's who deal with life-threatening trauma. But my goal would be not only to have that, but to have all medics and actually ER nurses and maybe some trauma nurses. I don't know that this platform would give trauma nurses too much capability, but ER nurses, when you get down to it, what the medic does in the field and the very initial thing that the nurse does in the ER is pretty similar. I know sometimes we have some barriers because some of our classes have pre-hospital trauma life support, which talks about the initial care of the trauma patient. Like that because it's pre-hospital. Well, it's based on taking care of that initial assessment of the trauma patient. So I also eventually for this to mesh with the March Pulse thing, so we can push that out across the state. Did that answer your question, or I just talked long enough?
I guess I'm getting old, Courtney, I'm sorry. So I'm a knuckle dragging trauma surgeon, so you gotta put it in like really simple terms. So are you trying to develop a educational warehouse of courses? Are you trying to track the current training that paramedics have? Or are you trying to set up a system where you say you need so many hours of this, so many hours of this, so many hours of this, and you want a system to be able to track that? What's the goal?
The state has for me to be relicensed, I have to have so many hours of CEUs.
Right.
And there's a buckets there. I have to have so many hours of trauma, so many with cardiacs, so many pediatrics, so many with general hours. So they track that with the system they've got, the industry system. This would actually be a method to get the material, to get the in-service hours.
So it's a warehouse of training that they can plug and pull from what they need. Got it. Okay, that's right. Thank you for simplifying that. I appreciate it.
EMS training ongoing. We had asked Jimsa, because Jimsa is our contractor, does most of the training that we do. So I've been interested for some time in knowing how many hours we actually impact over the passes. And they sent me the spreadsheet that I asked for. If I remember right, we do 13 different training courses. And of those 13, so far this fiscal year, they've done 95,000 contact hours of actual training. And I thought that was quite phenomenal. I was extraordinarily pleased with that. Online EMS training, that's a pilot project we did before last. We kind of paused because of COVID, because COVID hit right in the middle of it and kind of messed up everything. And we're going to be talking about that again at the next subcommittee. What I kind of hope that we might be able to do, because some of these groups that we're talking about not done have the capability of, they have the modules embedded into their software. So if I, as Port Victoria and Emmanuel County, wanted to do an EMT class instead of hiring an instructor who come in and having students sit in classroom all day, they could go to that website, take those modules, and then I could have my instructor then just do their practical skill sets, so it's clinical, and they could write the clinicals for us. So we're trying to see if we can't merge those two to make a cost-effective way to train medics. That is a huge issue in our world right at the moment, staffing. The next one is Arbinger training, and that's something we started about 2 years ago. And the Arbinger training we got cranked up with and did the initial classes, did the facilitators courses. COVID hit, so we couldn't do it. I would encourage you to just Google Arbinger, arbinger.com, and look at those classes. I actually facilitated the first one done. I facilitated yesterday and the day before in Habersham. It was very well received. I think it's great training. I'm looking forward to doing it. It's a whole different way of looking at leadership. The fiscal accountability is not a whole lot different from last month's report. We're still on line to finish our fiscal, our FY, this FY. I'm done.
Any other questions for Courtney? Okay, thanks, Courtney. We'll move into injury prevention subcommittee report. Dr. Bleacher.
The injury prevention subcommittee met in March, and mostly the meeting dealt with updates from different programs. Daniel Wu from Grady presented an update on the Cardiff model. A national network is being created. He's co-chair of that committee, and his presentation is focused on trying to get help in implementing this Cardiff program in the state through the trauma centers. It's a program whereby a pinpointing of where violence is occurring based on sharing of data between trauma centers, law enforcement, community entities, and it's been validated and shown to work. And so what was proposed is that he speak to us in August at our meeting to garner our support in how we can help him implement this in Georgia. The next was an update on the FASTER model, which is a firearm safety through emergency, and the focus of that update was to present some bugs in the database that are being dealt with, and to set up a set of meetings for a plan to disseminate the information. So that dissemination meeting occurred just recently. I unfortunately couldn't make it. And then there was an update on the BOLD program, which is dealing with dementia and Alzheimer's. So relatively speaking, it's about preventing falls. And the request was for involvement on an advisory board. So Stephanie Gendron from Regions 8 and 9 volunteered to be on the advisory board. And then Crystal Smith made a presentation about fungicides, which is also a fall prevention program related to activities that older people can engage in to maintain their motor coordination and strength. And she requested funds for a pilot for that, and we've already approved that reallocated funds. It's $44,000.
Any questions for John? I have to say, I love your acronyms. You got the coolest acronyms. I mean, I just wish I could think of things. I can't think of things. I just don't have that brain set. So,
Dr. Ashley, I can give you a brief update on the injury prevention grants. if
Yeah,
you'd like
please
it
do.
while we're on injury prevention. As you know, we awarded injury prevention programs right in the middle of the summer last year, right in the middle of COVID. So the majority of them were delayed, obviously, because of so many of the injury prevention programs are hands-on and are pivoting. Some are moving slowly, but I'm giving them really a full year to give us an update. So we'll have their reports. I didn't want to bring their reports to the table this meeting because the research ones are presented this meeting. So I'd like to keep those staggered so you're not overwhelmed with grant reports, but we should have an update, or we will have an update for all those programs in August meeting.
very, very good.
But I have had communication with all of them. They're all trying to get going, if not going already.
Yeah, the ATV grant that Memorial got is moving forward for sure. Emily Burnside, our injury prevention coordinator, who's a rock star,
Yeah,
is
she's
really,
amazing.
she is really doing well. So
Yeah.
I think there's a solid plan in place. We're in the middle of a site survey window, so we're trying to get all that done first. And then by June, I think we'll be able to really hit the ground running and complete that for sure.
Yeah, that seems to be about where everybody is. So yeah, full report on that in August, just an update there.
Okay, thanks, Lori.
Sure.
Is that it, John?
That's it.
Okay. All right, how about the trauma systems report? Dr. Dunn?
So we were tasked back, I didn't, was it August? Yeah, I was one of those people that didn't take a step backward where everyone else did, and so I was the one left standing in front. When Dr. Ashley chaired me to take over the data subcommittee. And really, it's the, you know, the pie in the sky question of time to care metric that we've been struggling with for years. What really kickstarted us, or jump-started us, was the Office of EMS&T when they gave us that report back in August. That really helped us kind of solidify our thoughts. We went over that report. We've had a couple meetings since then. And then the devil's in the details. The data is very, very challenging, very disjointed, very hard to kind of parse through. But so I think the decision was moving forward, at least to take it in a little chunk and try to identify the most severe patients first and find out what the barriers were to get them from, you know, the bubble from the ditch to the trauma center. And I think Gina has been very, very helpful, and along with Liz and a couple other people doing a really in-depth drill down. If you want anything done, talk to a trauma program manager. Gina's got a slide presentation that she wants to talk through real quick about kind of what her summary is. Did I encapsulate that correct?
That's fine. Liz asked me if I would go through. This, actually, the PowerPoint is in your packet, and I'm not gonna go through it in detail, but I'll hit the high points, because this is actually the PowerPoint we gave to the data subcommittee. So I have had the opportunity to work with Marie at the Office of EMS and Trauma, and it's been fantastic. Those are some of my favorite days, you know, when we sit down and kind of parse through the data. But one of the things we wanted to look at is, okay, those patients that are really time sensitive, shock patients, we pulled that cohort out, or tried to drill down into those details that Dr. Dunn was referring to about where our opportunities might be, and getting to that time, you know, elusive time to care number. So we looked at patients that arrived at a trauma center or center we're receiving data from, that arrived in shock. So we kind of define that as not only a systolic blood pressure of less than 90, but a shock index of greater than 1. And if we had a base deficit there of greater than -6, we threw that in there too. And then we looked at the ones that went from a 3 or 4 center providing data to a Georgia trauma center, so we could hopefully match up those records. What happened when they got to hospital number 2? So those that were transferred out that actually arrived there in shock, we kind of drilled down those 3 buckets and got 161 patients, and that was out of 2 years, so 2019 and 2020. So that was a big chunk of patients to try to drill down into. So we increased the shock index to 1.5 to see if that would narrow it down to what we could look at. And those transferred to a named trauma center, because some of the hospitals in there is just trauma center other, so we couldn't match that up. So that left us with 7 records. So that was manageable. We could drill down into those to look at. And of those 7 records we reviewed in the state trauma registry, 3 of the 7 appear to be true hemorrhagic shock patients. The 3 others were major head injuries, and 1 was actually discharged from the ED at the receiving facility. So they kind of self-selected out of not being seriously injured. Of the 3 shock patients, 1 of them was a motor vehicle crash, 1 was a GSW, and 1 was a kind of penetrating other. 2 survived to be discharged. 1 was an ED death at the receiving facility. 2 went from a level 4 to a level 1, and 1 went from a level 1 to a level 2 burn facility. The average time at the sending facility, so hospital A, was about 1 hour and 48 minutes. The shortest being 1 hour and 14 minutes, the longest being 2 hours and 41 minutes. For that. So that kind of gave us an idea of, you know, how long they were staying in those sending facilities. We found some data integrity, you know, that brought up questions as we went along. We had some ED departure times not in the system. We had missing E codes, missing trauma surgery arrival times, you know, just some things we noted when we went through the data. So that was one snapshot in time. So those were the patients that arrived at a, not the endpoint trauma center in shock, but that set of vital signs was one snapshot in time. It was the first vital sign recorded within 30 minutes of arrival. So a lot can happen after the patient arrives. So the second set of vital signs may be terrible and the patient, deteriorates. So we shifted to looking at patients that were transferred in equals yes, and they arrived at the receiving facility in shock. This was a much larger bucket. We got a lot more patients from that field. So when we applied the same filters, the shock index, the systolic blood pressure less than 90, and the base deficit greater than -6, that was 774 patients compared to the 161 patients from the first filter. So we again increased the shock index. That gave us 40 patients. That was still a lot. So then we also transferred from a designated center to a center supplying trauma registry data to the state. And this narrowed us down to 11 patients there. We haven't reviewed all of those 11 patients yet, like we did the previous 7. Only one, but I did include the record summary of the one patient we did drill down into because it brought up a lot of questions and some interesting things. So it was from a level 4 to a level 1. It was a motorcycle crash. The patient stayed in the first facility for an hour and 39 minutes. Lapse time from arrival at referring emergency department to accepting emergency department was 2 hours and 35 minutes. There were some interesting things. The level 4, obviously, we got off the bat, the patient did not need to stay there because they had a helicopter dispatch prior to the patient ever arriving at their facility, 26 minutes prior to them arriving at the level 4 facility. And then the helicopter arrived 22 minutes after patient arrival, but the patient didn't leave for another hour and 17 minutes after the helicopter. So, and then it was a 41-minute transport time to the accepting facility. At the accepting facility, it was full trauma activation, blood started, patient went to the OR, but expired in ICU back from their injury. So again, we noticed some issues. The patient came from a level 4, but that record was not in the level 4 registry of that hospital. We couldn't match a record at the level 4 center. So that brought up a question. And then again, obviously they recognized the patient couldn't stay there. So potential next steps for this, we want to look at the other 11 patients and dig even deeper, because I do believe the devil's in the details to be able to make a difference. What are the challenges to getting these patients out in a timely manner? And I know that first report from DPH for the time to care kind of focused on the EMS times and the scene times. And I definitely won't steal Bree's thunder, because I know she's been working with Danlin pulling out that first hospital to second hospital time for those that are transferred. So I think that'll be another piece of the puzzle.
I just want to thank you guys for what she comes and meets us in Madison. It's like a situation room. We have my big screen out on the table and like we're drilling down, because unless you do that, you don't really know where some of the issues are. And then like the things that you don't even think of, like that helicopter was dispatched before the patient arrival, yet sat on scene for a while. Like there's so many things that have to happen correctly in order to get the patient to tertiary care.
Couple of questions. So it looked like the helicopter took 48 minutes from the time of dispatch to the time they arrived.
And we don't know the details of that, right? So we don't know what the challenges were. Did it have to come from a secondary base? I mean, those are.
We don't have the answers. We're just
Answers.
finding the
That's right.
problems.
The question.
So I guess going forward, are we trying to develop a process that we don't, I mean, I'm not, it's not my expertise. You live at stuff 2 years old. Okay? And my point is, if you get a patient, you want to get a patient, you go get a patient. And you look at the record and it says, go to the level 4 center for 2 hours. Shouldn't somebody pick up a phone and say, okay, we got this patient and we're going to be getting all the records, but can y'all give us a synopsis of what happened at your hospital, what your challenges were, what we could do to help you? If you Everybody's got their defensive mechanisms, particularly in this world if somebody may sue you. But if we work out a relationship, say, what can we do to help you? Maybe you get, or maybe if it's a designated center, you specifically ask that registrar to help review the case. Because we review all the cases currently. And the other hospitals are not designated, I just don't. But my point is, sooner is better than later as far as getting that answer.
Absolutely, and this was an interesting thing, so now we're going back to kind of looking at that time from first ED to second ED, and we're focusing on the year 2019, because we all know 2020 was just like, throw that in the garbage. So it's probably not a good representation of what that looks like. In 2019, there were well over 6,000 patients transferred in. The majority of those came from non-designated centers. When we look at that, I don't have the exact number, Marie may have that in her notes, I did write it down, but that complicates things when you're working with, the lines of communication are probably not quite as good with the non-designated centers, but I agree that that's something we need to work on.
I will
So-
tell you just from a, I'm sorry. go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
No, I can tell you from a process improvement standpoint for individual trauma centers, the trauma medical directors are required to reach out to the referring centers if there's an issue in transport. So I've made several phone calls to the various outlying critical access hospitals that are not level 4s. And hey, listen, why did Bubba stay in your ER for 4 hours? And they can't tell me that because the guy that took care of Bubba is no longer working there, and the ER charge nurse that is in charge is no longer working there. And so it's a very, very transient population of medical personnel that staff these critical access hospitals. So it's difficult to get access to that data, unfortunately. And I'm probably,
And we don't know that that didn't happen.
Right.
Because we can't see that, so, that's something.
Yeah,
So,
we're just.
once
looking at
again,
Clinical care that was
Yeah,
punched in on the key.
that we pull out of that.
So I think to answer Courtney's question too, to give you, I'm glad Jim spoke up. So two things come to mind. One is, I think this foray into the data, like I wouldn't put a lot of weight in anything, sort of like when we started with our data with the centers, with the TQIP data, we said, let's just do it and see what, and then we're not making decisions. Let's just learn to do it. So I see this as a learning process. And I think a tremendous amount of work. And I'd like to acknowledge David and the group and Marie for working to get this done. This was a great team effort and really a step into the room of knowledge and learning how to access data. And so I see this as a big win to get started. So I think from all the things that you found, you came in with one question, but you developed about 10 more that need to be addressed. So that's progress. I'm very excited about that. So that's the way I would look at that, Courtney. I don't think we're to the point we can make a lot of decisions yet, but we're learning. And so then your follow-up question, you're exactly right. This kind of work doesn't help you on the ground like real time yet. We can get there, but not yet. But the way it is, I do the same thing Jim does, and our region's pretty good. I'm real proud of the PI efforts, with the region, but people talk on the phone. But when I have my weekly PI meeting with Josie, my PI coordinator, I got a bunch of stuff I look at, various filters and obviously all the deaths. And I'll get some guy that was, maybe died, gunshot wound, and he was at the other place for maybe, I don't know, 2 hours and got 6 liters of crystalloid and no blood. And that goes off like, okay, we got an issue. And they get here to us. So then I've developed a relationship and I have no authority over the guy that I'm going to call on the phone. So I have to approach it in the right way. And the way my conversation goes, I'd be interested to hear how Jim handles this, is, hey, and when they get a call from like Dr. So-and-so at another hospital, it's like, okay, the antennas go up. Hey, I'm just having a PI meeting here. And I'll usually say this, all protected. This is a PI review. So then it's like, okay, we're just talking, good old boys talking here. And I just go in and say, hey, I was reviewing this chart, I have to review all these, part of my job and everything. And we get a lot of patience from you guys. So I understand you're and I always call the director, whoever the director, ER director is, whoever.
Yep.
And I say, I know you have a PI process. So I just sort of want to give you some feedback and just see, because sometimes we don't always get the information right. And I just sort of walked through. These were the things that I found, just wondering if you could take a look at that chart. Maybe we could get them a little bit quicker. I'm very unintimidating, unauthoritative. It's just a conversation. And I've been impressed with the responses I get on, well, yeah, that actually, let me look into that for you. And sometimes they'll call me back and say, I looked into that, you were right about that, or actually that wasn't right. And I've developed some relationships through that. So it's a time consuming process, but it can be done. And I think that's what helps the most to answer your question, Corey. So that's how it has to be done.
And I absolutely agree that one-on-one conversation.
Yeah.
And that ability to develop a communication and trust so that there's issues, in a perfect world, one day if they have a question about, they call you and ask for your advice if you do it right. And hopefully one day we'll get that. But Dr. Dunn's points well taken. The turnover in those hospitals is tremendous.
It's hard to develop that trust when it's a new guy on the phone every time they call.
Yeah.
But it also provides us the opportunity to do some education as well, because they don't understand about, massive transfusion protocols or 1-to-1 ratio, or why should I give them blood when I got 6 liters of crystallite? Why is that wrong? And so it's just, sometimes it's helpful to provide education as well.
And it's one other thing I would just point out, because I'm calling my peers out. There's the new policy is that if you want to hang additional units of blood, you have to do additional training and get credentialed by your medical director. And in the state of Georgia, I think it's either 12 or 14 services who have done that. So we had one a few weeks ago that was a blood center, and they hung a unit of blood, gave us, I think, 2 more, so get the hell out of here. That's what we did. And the physicians on both ends said that it hadn't been the extra blood, the patient would have died. Could have been a trauma patient, could have been a GI bleed, could have been anything. But my point is that from my perspective, and our regional council, I call out our other directors. Our directors don't have to understand that that's important, and they're gonna have to do that. And we're gonna have to send out, we're gonna have to get them up on. So right at the moment, if it's a critical access hospital, they do want to give blood, they give another unit to the ambulance. If they give it, they're in violation of the rule.
Is that right? I didn't know that.
That's all.
Really?
So you can't, the ambulance can't transport blood from another hospital?
If the nurse hangs it,
Yeah.
then they can transport.
Right.
But they can't hang.
You can't
additional
spike it and
unit
hang it.
Without additional training and credentialing
Wow.
by the medical
I
director.
didn't know that either.
So you'd have to
That's all.
spike the 2 or 3 units and have them hang.
That's right.
That's the way.
That's legal. You can have them stacked up about a.
That's right.
They can turn the valve. but
Wow.
I don't know too many folks.
And I guarantee you the outlying hospitals don't know that. Right?
And
So,
Is that something we could address? I mean, how do you fix that kind of
Well,
issue? It sounds
yeah.
just like a knowledge.
and I'll let David, I'm sure he'll be willing to address that too, but don't get me wrong, I'm not against the additional training. I trained to hang blood when I took back before the war. Back then, it's been 2 or 3 wars since I've trained.
that's right.
But
Was it in glass bottles back then?
hell, yeah. Well, you didn't have to go there. That's where I be.
Don't laugh, I've done that. I've used glass bottles
You're
before.
still getting some.
Oh, I opened myself up there. But it is important to do it right. It is important to know the reactions that can occur. I think that David and I had some conversations about working with the rural EMSs in particular about that. So I think we're on the right track to get that fixed.
You're all right about the blood. We're less crystalloid now and more blood or plasma, and it makes a huge difference in the operating room. The valve doesn't swell. It's amazing.
That's what I like about the March Balls concept, that 5 things to save life. That's the training you came up with. It aligns very well with what community's been doing. So,
I'd be happy to take any questions. It sounds like we've generated some good discussion.
Gina,
Liz,
just-
did you want to give any final thoughts?
Yeah, no, I think it's just been a great effort to look at this. I know, I was so excited to tell Dr. Ashley, he still wants our 30, he doesn't want us to forget about our 30,000 foot view, but it has been just eye-opening looking into these records and seeing what some of the.
What the challenges are, yeah, absolutely.
And
Michelle,
with
do you have a
the
comment?
new help of our new formalized rural level 3, level 4 group, we can kind of target where we can help. Because I'm not even sure if a lot of those centers have access to blood.
Right.
So
Well, some of them do, some do, some don't, that's correct.
I think that is where my question's coming from. So you said 6,000 transfers in 2019 from non-trauma centers to trauma centers.
Well, just transfers to us. And so transferred in equals yes in the
Okay.
registry.
Yeah.
So for, over the state. So some of those, but when we, looked at the numbers, most of them came from non-designated centers.
Yeah, I mean, just if, Michelle, if you just look at from Memorial in Savannah, 40% of our admissions are transfers in. And if we have 4,000 admissions, that's, you know, I don't know, 1.6 or 1,800, and those are all critical access hospitals, so.
That's
And
what-
most of them are non-trauma centers.
Right.
So that's my question. Are we looking at that data as we decide who gets funding and designation at state level, designation/funding verification? Do we look at that to be able to decide who really needs trauma centers, or is there any way to look
We've
at that a
looked
little
at that
bit
before.
deeper?
Dr. Ashley actually published a study looking at kind of where we need to place trauma centers in the state based on the American College of Surgeons NBEDS criteria. And I think, I don't know if we've really addressed it as a commission, but I think when a new trauma center pops up, they don't necessarily get funding because there's no funding in place. The funding, you know, the budget's set, so there's no room for additional funding. So I think that's probably something we should address with the commission at some point in time about how do we not only encourage trauma centers, but how do we increase funding? Because our you know, the pot is limited. It's a set amount of money, so.
And we did have a top 5 or top 8 list based on data of where we get the most impact with circles. You know, if we put one here, we get another circle and they overlap with time circles. And we've been chiseling away, OEMS&T and us working with centers, and we've got 2 or 3 centers off that list that were strategic that we have a map now, and then the map in that somebody did, I think it was Pratt, that shows how the state's getting closer together with the circle. So we can show you that.
Good. No, I think that's great. I mean, I think it's just, you gotta look at the data.
Yeah.
Gotta look at patients.
Yeah.
That was in the detail.
All right, Jim, anything else?
Nope, that's it.
All right, well, our next report, I'm super excited about on many levels. I'm gonna put my Courtney hat here on. Courtney has got me on the rural kick, you know, over the years. He's got me out of metropolitan on the rural side. I need a hat, Courtney. Okay? I need some kind of rural hat.
Or cowboy boots.
Or cowboy. But,
You know, a hat's cheaper. We're at a limited amount of funds here.
Yeah,
Let's
limited
just give it a
amount.
hat first.
Liz, I know you're new here, but we can't wear cowboy boots because we can't see big socks.
That's right, exactly. There you go, that's right.
that's true, got a hole in them. But,
We can start a new trend of fancy cowboy boots.
That works.
But we've done a lot of work with the 1s and 2s and a lot of financial assessments and pay for performance and all the things. And being at a lot of meetings like this and our retreats and various things over the years, I've got a chance to talk to various folks like Dr. Patterson and some other people, some folks from Athens, just various people around the state that the needs of level 3 and level 4 centers, and then even non-trauma centers, just smaller access hospitals with trauma. So this is a huge interest of mine, all kidding aside, a huge interest of mine. I think that's the next frontier is rural Georgia and developing the 3s and 4s. And so we've done some work, and Liz has done some talking, and we have now a level 3 and level 4 subcommittee, which is going to be chaired by Dr. Patterson and Dr. Register, who are from those type centers. So a seat at the table, and they're meeting and getting organized. So I'm very excited about that. And then on another note, the chair that's here today, the co-chair, is one of my former residents who I'm extraordinarily proud of, that trained in general surgery and now is in Fort Deal and is the trauma director there. So, Dr. Register, welcome to the commission and your first report. We're excited you're here.
Thank you, I appreciate that. So just to introduce myself to the group, I'm Alicia Register. Like Dr. Ashley said, I trained in Macon under him. I graduated in 2019 and started at Crisp Regional in Fort Deal, Georgia. We're a level 3 trauma center. And Dr. Patterson, which I'm sure you all know, down in Thomasville, and I are co-chairing the subcommittee. So first, I want to thank everyone in the commission for approving the funding for the readiness cost surveys for the level 3 and 4 centers. That'll really help us understand the finances of what it takes to keep the doors open. And I think the conversation we just had with the drill down and everything, kind of addressing these issues, when you're starting at hospital A and then getting them to the final hospital. But I've learned a lot about over the last 2 years being in a rural center coming from a level 1. So again, I just wanted to thank the commission for approving the funding for that. Some goals and projects that we have on our subcommittee's agenda are to create a more streamlined process of transfer, starting with which mode of transportation. So like we just talked about, do you use helicopter, do you use ground? Depending where you are, ground may be faster. But ground also requires resources from the initial hospital, like if the patient's intubated, they have to send a respiratory therapist in the ambulance with them. If they're on pressors, they have to send a nurse, and that goes into the decision tree, because if you send them on a helicopter, you don't have to send those resources. So I learned a lot about that, especially in COVID, when we don't have those resources to send, because then we'd be down a nurse or a respiratory therapist. So just kind of forming a more streamlined process, starting with how do we transfer the patient and getting them out quicker to the end facility. And then which facility should they go to? Certain hospitals, we've had a pediatric neurosurgery injury recently that I guess the staff that was working didn't realize Macon doesn't do pediatric neurosurgery. Making those phone calls to then have to, okay, now we need to call CHOA in Atlanta. So those 5-10 minutes didn't have to be spent. So we want to create a contact list of transfer centers. So it's more streamlined, quicker to know exactly what facility do we need to be calling and getting on the phone at the same time. And then also we're working on PI projects geared towards level 3 and 4 centers, such as hip fracture care and our orthopedic services, making sure that they are being treated in a timely fashion. And then also focusing on geriatric care that we keep at our facilities. And I think that'll go into the performance matrix budget allocations. That's part of the funding consideration as well. One other thing that we wanted to create was a process for rural centers to have IRB approval capabilities. I know at my center, I don't have an IRB approval pathway. So if I wanted to do projects, that required IRB approval. I need to figure out a way to do that. So like we just talked about, the devil's in the details. You have to have data to tell the story and to then make changes. And so being able to have IRB approval for rural centers would just really help us be able to develop more data and research from the rural centers. That's really kind of the main things that we're focusing on right now. I would like to ask the commission for consideration of funding for the ACS consult visits for level 3s, and then external consult visits for level 4 centers. Pennsylvania and Texas have really good systems for those consult services for level 4 centers. And I think we've been having some discussions with them already to start the process, but we would like to ask the commission to consider funding for the ACS consult visits for level 3s and then external consults for level 4. That's really what I had on the agenda. Dr. Patterson, did you have anything to add?
No, not directly. I really want to appreciate the commission to allow us to do this. Also, I appreciate Dr. Ashley, and I will work on getting you a rural hat so you can place it when we're giving our next report. But I think with Dr. Register and myself, ultimately, being in one of the areas of need, which is Southwest Georgia, I think we have a lot to bring to the table and ultimately push things together. Just to dovetail into another point that was given earlier, the topic of hanging blood by EMS was actually a major point we discussed at our last work group meeting as a barrier for us to transfer patients. And so we see that as a need for us, and I'm glad the commission sees that as well. But ultimately, I think we're getting a lot of headway. We're getting the inertia into meeting, and ultimately, I think we'll carry this into our summer meeting at St. Simon's, and ultimately, hopefully make some headway into what we're doing as far as projects. But I do appreciate the commission at least giving us an open form of communication right now.
Thank you, Dr. Patterson. We're glad you're on the call, and like I said, I'm real excited you and Alicia are heading this up. You all both have a lot of energy and talent, so I think it's going to be very good.
I'm sorry I couldn't be there today. I'm actually on trauma call, so.
I understand.
One point, and David may hit on it too. Paramedics with training, and again, there's an advanced scope. A post-licensure skill is on ventilators. Paramedics can give pressure ranges all day long, but to do a ventilator, an advanced ventilator, have additional training. Again, that is it's kind of an uphill climb to get it done, go through all the processes, and do all the training. But I'm a hospital based, so I have different focus because I understand how critical it is. But I have colleagues that unfortunately look at it like, well, it's their problem, they need to solve it. And it's not one person's problem or the other, it's the patient's that's got a problem. And I'm unfortunate that we haven't been able in every place in the state of Georgia for everybody to come to the table and work that out. Because I know, again, I'm hospital based and COVID was there. Some folks said, we don't just have to send a respiratory therapist. If we're a small hospital, you may have one respiratory therapist, and that's if you take that person out of the hospital, who manages the vent patients in the hospital?
Exactly.
Some of our ventilators during that time actually were off by our ambulances at ICU, keeping those. I think we will need to do a lot of work between the hospital community and the EMS community. And I have colleagues that say, well, you have to put trauma in the ER, and I've only got one truck in the county. Well, that's a shame. When I get another one available, we'll carry it. Well, yeah, we'll get over there and bed to death, and that's not so effective. So we've got that. My big thing is to try to figure out, is EMS a piece to the puzzle that you can't fix? And how do we go about fixing that? How do we get the resources to see to it, to get people? So they're pretty helicopters, but if it goes to thunder and lightning, they don't fly. Because they look nasty upside down. That's what. But thank you for what you do. Thank you so much.
Good comments. Liz, do they know about the 5 things for rural hospital, the PAWS, the things that we're trying, I think you and Courtney are working on that. Has that been cascaded to them yet to chew on, or is it, I'm not exactly sure where that is in the big world.
Right, so what we're gonna do is, we originally had this group set up as like level 3, level 4, and then Courtney, Nita Ham from State Office of Rural Health, we were working on like rural. So we're just gonna make that one big happy family because they are boots on the ground in the area that we need to infuse this program out through.
So I think it'd be good for them and the non-trauma centers, because I see it all coming together.
Yeah,
If we can get that off, that'll save lives. I mean, if we could just get that going. I think that's great.
And then the consult process that Dr. Register spoke to will include in the amended budget, because we're not gonna get that off the ground. ACS is, just starting back virtual visits, and we'll go back to some in-person visits. And then, as Dr. Register mentioned, we've had some discussions with Texas and Pennsylvania because they have very mature processes around that and how they can help our level 4, since ACS kind of ignores level 4s other than having some orange book criteria.
And I'll have to comment, if I can briefly, that thank you, because I'm very impressed that the level 3 and 4 centers have stepped up and asked for 2 things: the scrutiny of readiness cost. It's an undertaking. It was hard for us to really wrap our heads around to do it. But the other thing is to open their doors to scrutiny about for a full-scale ACS colonoscopy.
Without sedation.
Without sedation.
Yeah, exactly.
And that the reason the 4s want, want an extra, I think that's
No,
That's,
that's
I mean,
very
it's so-
impressive.
It's
Very
very
impressive.
impressive, and it just shows kind of the advancement and the development and where we are. And that they're welcome that, yes, come, yes, we want somebody to, you know,
Because we need
The
to
people-
know
eyes
what the
from the
barriers are
outside
and the
to things
costs
that
for the
inside
threes and fours so that we can fight for
Yes.
funding. It all
Yes.
comes back to data and understanding what your needs are. So asking
pretty
is,
cool.
I think we talked about with the readiness cost survey, we want to have an understanding of what potential startup costs are, so that therefore we could develop a startup funding program, because we're unique in that we, the commission has approved one-time startup grants for people, but in other states, we've seen where there's like programs where there'll be a certain amount of funding per year up to a certain amount, and then you either become a trauma center or you don't, but your funding is over. You have that limited time. So, it would help, and, we probably need to increase that if we're gonna really increase the number of access points in South Georgia.
Yeah, I mean, I come from a rural center, so I am excited just as much as Dr. Ashley is for the work you guys are doing. I just want us to make sure we think through, if we're gonna participate in getting funding for the consultative visits, that we make sure that there's bang for the buck on that. I just don't want to be handing out money for consultative visits, and then the center decides, well, we don't want to go through with this. So there's got to be some skin in the game from the centers. Now, the fact that the centers are even asking for that, I agree with Dr. Medeiros that is huge, and that sends a huge signal that they're pretty serious about this, right? Because they're opening themselves up for scrutiny. But we've had a couple level 4s drop out of the system after we gave them, startup costs, and then they just decided not to keep going. So I want to make sure that we are good stewards of the resources that we have access to, but I also think it's vitally important that we try to build up our 3s and 4s throughout the state. Absolutely, we need to do everything we can to do that. So it's just about balancing.
Well, one thing too, I think, we've been asked over and over, how can we support the 3s and 4s? How can we infuse some of the funding we get in support of building up and sustaining some of the 3s and 4s? And so I think some of the vision is with these, the consultative visits, is make recommendations as to what they need to be a more efficient and productive, from a trauma perspective, systems perspective, center, and then they could put forth requests for grants that then we can, it's, well, we think we need this. This is an evaluation of the existing.
It's a
we need it for the
real-time
existing
expert
active
evaluation,
ones.
right?
Yes, and then maybe then look at expanding to some centers that have expressed interest. Start with the ones that kind of are kind of playing with the team.
And one
There's a road in
option
there.
around that, Dr. Register, our chief acute care surgery and our trauma, VP of trauma are both from Texas and surveyors. So do we build something internal for the level 4s? We've got a lot of expertise around the table. Many of us that have been through ACS visits already, I know that they know how to do it because they're doing it. They're still flying back and doing some of those. And how can we, from a state level, support those level 4s? And even without having to give funding from the commission, right? Like just on our own throughout our trauma system, being able to support those centers and develop relationships with Texas and Pennsylvania come in. That relationship, you'll have it virtually, right? But then you've got a relationship within the state of contacts from many of the level 1s and level 2s that could probably support you all through this. I just think it's an option to look at, that how we as a system could support those hospitals that are wanting to come up.
I know 3 or 4 Pennsylvania surveyors
Mhm.
that are active surveyors for the Pennsylvania system. So,
Well, I do think we need to serve as mentors. That's part of our mission as level 1 and 2 centers anyway, to the smaller centers, and kind of partner up and sister with them. I do think there's value in somebody from the outside coming in and looking, because they see things we don't. Right, because we've been down, we've been to centers, I've been to centers in the state, and we kind of know. It's not that we're not critical because we know each other. I just think when somebody from the outside whose mission that you're paying is to do nothing but turn rocks over, it's different. And I think if we're gonna embark on that and really invest in a good, maybe down the line we can develop that. But I would suggest or recommend that a neutral third-party non-linked entity to do a evaluation might be a good first out of the gate review. I hear coming from the computer. Is that you, Dr. Patterson?
I agree. I mean, I agree, Dr. Maderas. You know, and one of the words you said was mentor, and that's what we had also talked about was pairing people up with mentors, not only as the trauma program manager, the medical director, but also the trauma centers, and actually having some, you know, visits from each other, coming up there to see this other centers, y'all coming down here to see us. But then I think I agree with you, having a neutral point to develop a program eventually about level 4 certification in the state, just like modeled after Texas or Pennsylvania or whatever we decide would be a great help. But I think, you know, having been a level 2 in the past and having to drop out to be a level 3, and probably being the smallest level 2 in the state at that time, and maintaining the force that you have to have was just overwhelming. And it's even can be overwhelming as a level 3 in this area to attract certain physicians and certain resources to have. And so understanding that process, I think I understand hopefully what the level 3s and 4s need to do in the state to dovetail in with the program for the level 1s and level 2. So I completely agree with you. That would be a great process.
Okay. I think, anything else, Dr. Register?
That's all, Dr. Patterson. Do you have anything else?
I do not. Thank you very much, sir.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks a lot. Great report. We look forward to a lot more from you two. Okay. All right. So why don't we move into the last subcommittee reports? We have other reports now, but for this first part of the agenda, Dr. Wallace on the trauma administrator subcommittee.
Certainly. So there's been some discussion already. For those of you who are not aware, we've had trauma admin subcommittee, 2 versions. One that was led by GTC a few years ago when it initially started, and then the second one that we've had hit and miss over the last couple of years. And quite honestly, reflecting back to figuring out why we didn't have a lot of buy-in. The first step was that the second go around, we went through the TPMs to garner names to participate. And so we really didn't have a lot of support from the C-suite level as to who needed to be at the table. So the first step in this is that, one, we need to develop a charter and a purpose, because if we're going to, next step, go to the CEOs with a request for names, as busy as everybody is, we need to show value. We need to show what the expected outcomes are and what we're going to provide both for the trauma center itself, as well as the leaders and the time that they have to give up. So charter and a purpose, how does it align to what the commission needs? I think finance is a huge component, but they're really a huge, large need for both the quality component and then just running a trauma center, right? And understanding that, not even from the finance perspective, the administrative, the supplies, the equipment, the physicians, everything that goes into that. So I think that our first step is, and I'm actually still working on it, is the charter and purpose. Need your direction as to what else you would like or the commission would like for this group to focus on. Liz is going to help draft a letter to the CEOs that both she and I and you will sign to garner support from them to ensure that there's a high level oversight from the C-suite. Meeting cadence, obviously the summer and the spring meeting. Ideally with those, we would then meet before our trauma commission meetings. So any report outs and deliverables that the commission had, we would be able to provide those at the regular quarterly meetings. And then the last piece, which we have actually done a couple of times, is executive leader orientation. If you've not grown up in trauma in the state, you don't really know what that means. And a lot of folks, a lot of leaders that I have known have just get trauma added on, or even worse, they get ED trauma added on to ED. And trauma is so much bigger than just the emergency department. And that's probably one of the biggest gaps I've seen, is it's typically falls under the ED leader versus somebody who's got the true administrative strategic oversight. And so how do we orient them to that? And that will be everybody's involvement in being able to ensure, you know, what we think they need for that. So the questions I have, and it doesn't have to be answered in here, but we'll be looking for is the focus and priorities of this group that we need to make sure that the admin subcommittee is working through. And then the goal would be to get something out cool, but I have like June 15th on my calendar. So that we could potentially have the first admin subcommittee meeting in August at St. Simon's. So, any questions?
I think it's great.
Is there a requirement for administrative
There's-
involvement? Should this, or is this part of the paper?
It is.
Yeah, it is. It's just,
5%.
I was gonna ask that same question. Yep.
It is 5%.
Yeah.
It
So
has
when
not been
does
up
that start?
until now.
We took
We
the
took it.
percent out of
Yeah.
it. We made it a freebie because of COVID, and the administrators were the ones like in the facilities kind of driving the bus for COVID, so they weren't available for meetings realistically. But we put it back in there for this year so that.
So for
Dr.
22,
Wallace,
for
yes,
22 or
has-
for 21?
For 22,
22, okay.
has
So-
some bite to
The
the.
years that the actual meetings will take place, so Michelle will get some support, people will actually be required to attend.
Mhm.
Right, so that, and
The one you
the-
just voted on.
So I think, Michelle, to answer your,
What level of executive are you looking for? Can this be a director or? is it
I would
the I-
prefer not, I'll be honest with you, I prefer somebody at that C level, vice president, I mean, somebody who has trauma within their realm, but is not the direct leader for trauma. So somebody that's outside of GTCE group, probably their one up, most likely would be the person we would be looking for, or even higher, it doesn't matter, CNO, COO, whoever wants to.
somebody at an executive level that can be at those executive meetings.
And to help support, GTCE and what they need. So that has always been a good understanding that at the C level, what the trauma program needs and being able to drive that. Because you have a voice at the budget table, you have a voice at the strategy table, and you're able to help support the needs of it. But you have to understand what it is that you need to support. So I think that's why we prefer. We've had a mix of both, and it's kind of like, I don't need GTCE part two, I want more support. They have a great job that they have to do, and we want to be able to support them in what they need in our positions.
And I think what I would see is that when the trauma director and the trauma program manager need something, who they go to, like I have an infrastructure in my hospital, if I need, those executives that we go to, they need to understand what we do. And some places they do, some they don't. So what I would say, this is really good, the way you've laid this out and your timeline and everything. These are some things I hadn't thought of, but rejuvenating things. One thing I would maybe add to that would be like the first meeting is almost, I think you called it here, executive leader orientation. Actually, you already have it on here, but into that is education. There's so much going on that we're doing that affect their center with finances, with these audit things that we do of their center every year. Did you get your scoring right before we give you the money? I mean, there's so much going on that they really don't even, I guarantee that most people don't even know about.
Absolutely. No, 100% agree.
And so they need to understand, and the paper we did on the cost of trauma center readiness, it's all broken down there. I guarantee you nobody's seen that.
$10 million for level one,
So-
what you put out there.
It's out there. All that, there's a tremendous amount of stuff that they need to know. So it'd be like executive boot camp trauma 101.
Yeah.
And once were armed with all that information, wow, then amazing what they could do and as part of the team. So we really need their support, but we need them to be informed.
Right, absolutely. And there's lots of programs. I know Gina a few years ago did the trauma add-on fees. I mean, there's lots of those little things that unless you know about them, you don't drive it. So we
That's what we talked about,
drove it.
Dr. Ashley, we drove this home with the legislators to say
Mm-hmm.
we're funding initiatives like we want to bring a tailored finance course to the administrators group. We could potentially do that in August because we want to make sure that the centers are maximizing their recovery of finance that they can, with their, what's it called, your charge master and your activation and your ICU accommodation code, all those things that you can maximize your return for trauma patients. And then our funding is supplemental. There's actually language in 3111-102 that money is the last payer resort. It's not the first thing to say, you don't have to bill your activation fees. You don't have to charge your accommodation code. We want to make sure everybody's maximizing those opportunities.
Which is why it needs to be somebody at that level, because then as they take the finance course and see it, they can go back to their centers and work with the program director to make that all happen. Because some of them, if you ask, it was just until very recently, my finance people didn't understand that a level 1, 2, 3 activation is at 681, 682, 683. No, that's the level center, 6'1", 6'1", 6'1". But it's because you're battling that lack of knowledge and understanding. And, you know, yeah, I think it's important for us to ensure that the centers are maximizing and recouping their costs and investments, so that the money that they get from us is supplemental to maximizing what they're already getting.
Yeah. I agree.
Kind of cool.
All right, Jen. Good work. Good work. Okay, why don't we move then into the trauma system partner reports, which Jesse, looks like you're first up with GCTE.
All right, I will try to be brief here. Thank you all for allowing me to present to you today. I really enjoyed a lot of the conversations going on about the initiatives that we're really going to get into, especially about access to care. We've had some offline conversations prior to the meeting. And one of my goals in our meeting tomorrow is to kind of just talk with the GCTE committee about setting some goals that strategically align with the other initiatives going on in the state. I really appreciate the call that Dr. Dente set up a few weeks ago to kind of get us more on the same page. But I think this one with the access to care is going to be huge. And I think, as I said, if anyone was on that meeting with Dr. Dente, GCTE is made up of a ton of worker bees. So you have people who are very close to the work, who will really help us to get these things done. And so I'm going to present that as an idea, a very high level goal that then each of our subcommittees of GCTE can do work that feeds up to the high level goal, which will then feed up to the high level goals of the commission.
Jesse, can you move up towards the owl? I'm sorry, just so
Yes.
folks can hear your great work
Sorry.
you're reporting on. No
Okay.
worries, sorry. Yeah, we're getting text messages, but they can't hear you.
I won't start
Mission
over.
control, we're fixing it.
I won't start over, but I was basically just stating that we were going to have our meeting tomorrow, and one of the discussion points that I really want to spend some time around is setting goals for GCTE for the next 2 to 5 years that really align with the other goals of the different committee, the commission, and then the other state groups that we work with. So I think access to care is a great one, and I think involving the 3 SPORs and the rural centers that are not designated is going to be very important. But the 1s and 2s can also play a big part in that. Other things that our group is still working on, which I kind of want us to tie up and really only be working on like 2 big goals. I think historically GCTE has kind of been all over the place. Who wants to do what? It's almost like we just need some busy work, which we're all very busy, so we don't need. So I really want to align us under a couple of big umbrellas that our subcommittees can contribute to. So, but to tie things up, the PI subcommittee is still working on the PRQ playbook. You guys have probably heard us talking about. So hopefully they'll be finished with that pretty soon. Lots of education going on from the GCTE education subcommittee. I won't go through all the courses that have been done. You have that in your packets, but a lot of great work. Thanks to Lori and the foundation and that partnership. Additionally, the pediatric subcommittee has been very active, still working with the pediatric imaging project. And again, I think things like that are going to feed into those access to care and time to definitive care goals, because if we teach our centers not to do excessive imaging prior to transfer, then we're going to see some good results as far as time at that outlying hospital. So a lot of these projects really actually do touch the other work that I kind of want to shift us towards. So a lot of good work still being done there. As far as the pediatric subcommittee, they also did a lot of work during Child Abuse Prevention Month, which was in April. So they did some education to EMS services and to the hospitals. And then lastly, they are looking at beginning a project on the shock index and the pediatric adjusted shock index. So they're formulating some plans to educate on that, on the shock index for peds, which is hopefully going to be predictive in which patients need what types of resuscitation. So very busy, lots of work going on. I guess tomorrow is my official first meeting as the GCTE chair, and so I'm hopeful we're going to give the group a little bit of history of that committee, because we have so many new faces, and I think that's important to kind of take a step back and help everyone understand what the actual intent of that group is. And then again, like I said, I want to spend some time really talking about goals and strategic planning to align with the initiatives across the state. So that's all, unless anyone has any questions.
It's a great report. I really appreciate you lining up the goals, pulling everything together. That, the call yesterday with the opioid
Yes.
stuff. I mean, really, we're going to get so much more information and not tire everybody out. That's very good.
Jesse, if I could ask, what center are you associated with?
Northeast Georgia, Medical Centers.
Okay, great.
Charlie Rickard.
Oh,
No, Charlie Shaw.
Okay.
Dr. Richard, yes.
Richard. Okay. Thanks, Jesse. All right, up next, the Georgia Trauma Foundation, Lori.
All right, good afternoon. Yes. First and foremost, I would like to introduce Cheryl Ward, my partner, our Director of Philanthropy. She has now been on board for 5 months now. God, time is flying. And we are so excited to have her part of the team. She comes to us with over 10 years of experience in nonprofit administration and fundraising, and even has a very personal connection to trauma, which makes it a little bit closer to her heart and makes this organization a little bit meaningful for her. So would you like to say anything, Cheryl? I know I'm putting you on the spot, but.
I don't mind being put on the spot.
Okay.
Not a lot to say, just glad to be here and to be a part of everything that's going on as it relates to preventing trauma within the state.
Well, we're so excited to have her. Like I said, it has been an interesting start to the year as I've spent a lot of time educating her, but at the same time, her challenging and questioning me as well, and just the organization as a whole, and really trying to chart the foundation's future. And as we really pivot into more of this fundraising role that we were initially designed for. We've spent the past few years really developing the foundation and developing our role and developing the relationships. But now we've really taken a deep dive into what is that sustainable role and how can we continue to support the system. And along the lines with all of the conversations today, we are trying to figure out how we are a collaborative organization, and that everything that we do feeds into what the system is doing. And I think we've done a lot of work around what that model looks like. And I think that we'll have some stuff to present to you guys in August, as we are very much in the strategic planning phase for the next couple of years and trying to set some bigger goals as well. So a lot more to come from this side of the table, but we are continuing with our regularly scheduled board meetings, executive committee meetings. Thank you to the leadership of Dr. Bleacher for keeping us on track with that, and recruiting board members. Unfortunately, COVID has set us back a little bit still with meetings and advocacy and events, but we're hopeful all that's going to come back here soon, including Day of Trauma, which is set for August 13th. So Michelle, if you do want some space, just get with me so we can make sure we're trying to tie up our, rooms and all that with King and Prince now. But I did send out an email last week. No, it was Monday. Yeah, I don't know. Sent out an email Monday with the hotel link that is open and available. Registration for that will open next week. We are going to offer a hybrid model for in-person and virtual. So the registration that opens next week will just be for in-person, and then there'll be some more information coming out on the virtual side. So we're coming there. We have set a date for our gala at the Porsche Museum Experience Center to come back. That is set for April 30th, 2022. So should be back to full experience, and Cheryl will be helping support that and really trying to increase attendance and increase fundraising and all that around that. So I think that's it for me. Any questions or anything that you would like to add, Dr. Bleacher?
I think that's pretty thorough, Lori. Part of the issue is we're getting the infrastructure in place with Cheryl. I think it's important that we have a cogent message for potential donors, and that's why Lori's talking about the strategic plan potential donors need to know what they're donating money for.
Mhm.
And part of what work Lori and Cheryl have been doing is trying to create a more forward-facing approach to the community to let them be more aware of trauma and trauma care, so that there's a desire to participate and help. So this, there's always some level of frustration about, getting money raised, and that definitely is high on the radar. But I think that if we don't approach this correctly, then we won't be successful. And we are also reaching out to other philanthropic entities. Lori and Cheryl met with foundation people from CHOA, for example, to share some experiences on how to really find the right target audience for raising money. So it's a process.
It is a process, but we're excited about it. And as I said, we're really trying to figure out where we can support the system in its initiatives. And like I said, we've spent all this time in the past really developing the foundation, but one thing we've done really well is we've developed a process for continued education. We've developed a process for reviewing and distributing grants. So I think we have things to bring to the table for statewide initiatives. We just need to be able to partner with those instead of be really the driver of those, so that we can really help drive funding. So we're excited about the next steps. And while you have me, I will just continue on the grant platform. On page 76, I think it's right after the next report, are the research grant updates. I will tell you that Tracy Johns says that there's some typos in hers, so please don't take that too seriously, but it's just because Excel doesn't really catch grammar sometimes. But I do think, Dr. Ashley, yours is done. I think you're the first completed research project, so.
That is correct. And I would like to
Do you want to give a
report,
little verbal update there?
I can give a very brief update in the sense that the prospective, it's on page 79, but the prospective randomized trial of metal versus resorbable plates and surgical stabilization of rib fractures. We did complete that project. COVID, the follow-up was a little bit tough getting patients back in the COVID era, but we got through it. And that's been accepted for presentation at the AAST in end of September. So once I present it there, and then it'll be submitted to Journal of Trauma. Once I present it there, I can present it officially here to the commission. So, so pretty excited about that.
So we would ask you to present at the symposium.
Yeah, that'd be fine.
And there may be some other ones that are completed by then as well. Just a reminder, we did give everyone a 1-year extension due to COVID last year, just because so many clinical research projects were put on hold. So everybody did get that. Some included an updated expected completion date, some did not. But that's one of the things that Liz asked for their next report, is maybe give an overall status. They do break out on their second page their phase status, which, right now is kind of comparing oranges to apples when you look at each one of them. But we will look for an overall status and an updated final completion date for the next report.
And you have a good, I would just add to your toolbox or whatever, you have some good things in there to take forth to show what you do, and to, as you tell the story about why you should donate to the Georgia Trauma Foundation. You have research now, you have some research to show, you have tremendous amount of education to show that spans across a lot of different specialties. So, I mean, you've got some things to say, this is what we do, this is what we're good at, and this is how we help the trauma patients. You tie that into the trauma network survivors too, with their stories, which obviously you're one of. So, that I think it's a very powerful message. So I think just sort of crafting that, which I'm not very good at, but whoever it is.
We're working on
Yeah,
it.
that's a powerful message to get out to donors and then go after it now that Cheryl's here. So
Yeah.
it's nice to finally meet you in person. So welcome aboard.
I'll just make one final comment. One of the things that we wanted to do is expand the board, which we've done a little bit. But at many of our meetings, Regina and I are making motions and seconding each other's motions. So I move around in the medical and pediatric world, and I think our board needs to include business people, legal people, people that run in circles that are different than ours and mine. And so I'm open to any suggestions. If any of you think of a person that might be beneficial as a board member for the foundation, please let me know, and I could certainly reach out to them.
Very good. Okay, and thanks, John, for taking over, Fred's. We appreciate you stepping up to the plate. I know it's not been easy. All right, any other questions for Lori? Okay, Gina, GQuip.
GQuip, here for me again. My report's in your materials, but just briefly, I'll kind of go over the work. We've got several robust subcommittees that are just doing a lot of work, to the point sometimes it's hard to keep up with it, but that's a good thing to have. So we've got the opioid and AKI work groups, are the most mature. The opioid work group is actually working on trying to put together a draft state guideline, a multimodal guideline that we can share with facilities. We're kind of crosswalking what we have already available in the state. Northeast Georgia, Dr. Richard has done a ton of work around that. So we're kind of modeling what we're doing around his work. And then the AKI work group, we've done having some reanalysis of the data that we pulled from 2016 to 2017. Our research resident, Dr. Cogner, is doing a lot of work with that. And actually, we have submitted an abstract to the ACS Quality and Safety Conference. So hopefully we will hear if that was accepted.
Is that in July?
Soon. Yes, it's in
Conference.
July.
That's a virtual meeting though, isn't
It
it?
is, and it's open, it's free.
virtual.
From that standpoint. So, and then there's another arm that kind of working on the renal protective strategies to go along with that. So they're meeting monthly, the TBI work group. We've been working to get ready for the drill down exercise. That'll be our next detailed dive into our TQuip patients where we have opportunities. I had hoped that would go out this week, but hopefully next week. We're trying to finalize the registry report that we will be able to push out to centers to make the data collection easier for the centers, and we're all pulling it the same way. So we're working on that, and thank you, Dr. Ashley, for letting Tracy help me with that, because she has been invaluable for that. And we've got some PEDS component to that too, and we're going to have some PEDS specific questions, non-accidental trauma with that. We also did a validation score of the GCS, just kind of an audit to bring in GCTE for the GCS. That was completed. We're going to tag along to the level 3 and 4 / rural work group to see what we can do to assist their centers from that. And then we have a goal of getting some peer protection policies and procedures around what we do as we gather more data and have our risk adjusted platform, and all that will be key to having some good open conversations and really looking at our data. And I have loved tagging on to the different committees, GCT and the RTAC committees, and talking about what we're doing and some of the opportunities, because I think GQuip can help align a lot of those goals and assist with providing some support to their projects and direction from that. So we will meet again as it formally we went to quarterly. So we will meet again in July with the TND group. And then this week we got the NISQUIP side of GQuip back off the ground and had our first meetings with Dr. Sharma and Dr. Saeed from Augusta leading that side. So
Very good. A lot of stuff going on. Makes me tired just hearing about it.
The peer protection piece, that was included in the 22 budget, the funding. It's expensive. And Dan's office, the AG office is working on helping us get a special appointment to a attorney who specializes in peer protection to ensure, because Georgia has one of the most robust peer protection laws. That veil of peer protection has not been penetrated in Georgia case law. It's really robust. So we want to make sure that we are doing things in accordance to maintain that, and that
And
people feel comfortable.
When centers send us data that they feel comfortable doing that, especially as we grow and have more ask and larger amounts of data.
No, I think you're doing it the right way. You're building it from the ground up, and having that piece is a foundational piece. So it's,
And what's peer protected and what's not, because a lot of we need to be transparent about successes and failures and so that, again, that's public awareness and knowledge about what the struggles are, and where the opportunities are.
okay.
Can I just say while you're talking GQuIP, on the note of Day of Trauma, because GQuIP is getting so robust, with a lot to present, to work on and to present, we are really trying to focus or begin to refocus the Day of Trauma meeting for a very quality focused meeting. Maybe we consider changing the name, I don't know, but it aligns also what Kathy's doing with Georgia Society for ACS. Like, they're really trying to move that meeting to a more quality focused meeting. So as we continue, now that Dina's on board and we continue to develop that, I can see that being a full day of GQuIP active.
Lori, is the Day of Trauma just going to be a Day of Trauma? Because sometimes we've gone into Saturday and Saturday afternoon, Saturday morning. Is it just
No,
Friday?
it's just going to be a reception on Thursday evening and a full day Friday.
Okay, great. And then we're tag teaming with the ACS COT for Georgia, the Georgia State COT.
They will have the
ACS.
resident paper competition in the afternoon.
And their
And,
weekend.
right.
On Friday.
And
Our
I know
meeting's
this
Thursday.
website is meeting Saturday.
The
The
Georgia
circle.
ACS is meeting on Saturday.
On
That's
Saturday,
a
right.
day and a half, or they meet on Saturday.
And then the trauma paper competition for trauma is Friday afternoon.
Friday afternoon.
Got it.
Yeah.
All right, perfect.
And we're
And-
still Thursday? We meet on Thursday?
Well,
or-
so
No, we're
that's
not.
why
We're gonna meet the next week.
Yeah.
Oh.
I know,
Yeah,
which-
we
I
don't
Georgia.
have,
clarified that.
we didn't have
Yeah.
space.
This
Okay.
year's a little
This
different. We
year.
usually do, but this year's a little
Okay.
different.
And we weren't gonna, we had already planned to do everything virtually, but GSACS was able to, the fall Congress and COT meeting is gonna be virtual. They announced that, but they were.
We just can't have it on the beach under an umbrella or something?
Well,
I'm game
I'll
for
make
that.
that motion. I think we can do it.
Okay.
I mean, if you really want to hear that, Tucker, we can look at it. I do think there could be some value, not having 2 full days. I don't know. I think as we move forward,
Yeah.
like looking at the spring meeting to be the more statewide, everybody having meetings, and the summer meeting being more quality focused. I mean, I don't know if that works with your
I think
agenda.
what we need, though, what I was gonna tell you is, because we know rural wants to meet face to face, like we have a lot of small subcommittees that need to meet face to face, so that, since we're gonna be limited to just Thursday, and we've also got the resident paper competition, or, I'm sorry.
Maybe some
Friday.
committees
We
can meet
need-
on
yeah.
Thursday. You
And
can
we,
maybe meet on
we,
Thursday.
but when we put the draft agenda together, we left some like flex time in there. So for people to go off and have their meetings, like over a lunchtime, I think. So let's talk offline
Yeah.
and just make sure that
Okay.
we have enough space for people who want to have that face-to-face piece.
Just so it's in the minutes, though, it's helpful from a physician standpoint, because we tend to take a call a week at a time, to have the Day of Trauma and then another commission meeting the next week. It's
Right.
hard to be, on service.
And you and I had spoke about that, and this is just kind of a fluke year because of the impact of COVID and.
Sure, I
and the
understand.
kind of virtual. And what we do want to do, speaking of the virtual, I would just say that because we know that even those COVID restrictions are lifting, et cetera, there's still some meeting attendance challenges just in terms of budget. So Lori and I have already engaged with like a meeting, a virtual meeting through Tim Boone, who connected us with that asset. So that even though if people can't go physically, we still need your participation virtually, because we can't have everybody at the table to have these great discussions
Sure.
without that virtual attendance. And we don't want it to be some creaky conference line. We
We're
want,
trying
you
to
know,
do it, if we're gonna do it well, and it may be something that is the future, right? I mean, this virtual thing, it's not necessarily going away, and it gives people an opportunity for your PI folks or your registry folks that maybe want to sit down with a meeting that can't travel to be able to plug into the meeting for a short time period. So if it goes well, we're going to look at it, continuing it at least for the state level, twice a year meetings, and maybe even big picture, doing something like SACS, where we're able to push it out to, at least the education part of the symposium, to push it out to other trauma centers and generate some revenue on that. Because, the symposium stuff really is good content and it's for a small audience. So if we can get that out to a bigger audience, the virtual aspect, that may be an option.
So is that an option to meet commission, have a commission meeting at that time and where he doesn't have to schedule 2 weeks off? Or is that like, we just can't do it this year and we need to move on?
It might be possible this year, but it might take.
Same time.
So,
Okay.
we can look into it if you want us to, or we can stay with this different, with the 2 different weeks for this year, but going forward, make sure. I mean, again, I think none of us could have seen COVID coming in this
Sure.
time to kind of bait and switch and whatever, but we've always done it together, and in future state, we plan to do it together. This was just kind of an odd thing.
I would just, if we could look into it and it's possible, I'm being selfish here, but for me, it would help tremendously. But I don't know if it matters to the rest of
Do you
you.
want to make a motion to change the date if possible? Do we need to do that, or?
I don't know what the laws are on, the rules on that for advance notice.
I don't think there's any rule.
It's
I think it's
represented
just
by
what we
law.
vote.
Well, it just says that it has to be X number of members to call a meeting, and then we just need to.
Well, we're just changing the meeting date.
Yeah,
though,
there's just
so-
There's nothing around in the
nothing.
bylaws around the meeting
Yeah.
time. We just have to adhere to open meeting.
In general.
Well, you wanna make a-
Has the authority to do that. In general, the chair has the authority to call the meeting, and generally, in the bylaws, 2 or 3 other members, if the chair doesn't want to, could call the meeting, but the chair has the option to call the meeting, set the date and time.
Yeah.
But this is even a variation of that, in the sense this is already a scheduled meeting, we're just changing the date. So, and that's just a commission vote, so you want to make a motion that we look into it? that just
Sure,
see if it's
I'd like to make a
study
motion
the
that-
feasibility.
Yeah. To assess the feasibility in the era of COVID to change the commission meeting from the previous Thursday to the Thursday just before the day of trauma.
In person and Zoom capability.
Yes,
To put
what he
footnote
said.
on.
Yes.
Can I get a second on that?
Yeah, second.
Okay. All those in
Might have to
favor?
put you in a closet somewhere. We'll see.
Outside on the.
Yeah, I'm not-
There's a really good barbecue joint down the road.
I don't
that
want
we
to put
meet
any
at
extra.
every
work.
time, so, I mean-
Just if
With the
it
picnic table.
can't be done, it can't be done.
Be by the pool, I guess.
That's right.
Yeah.
Okay, any opposed to that? I'll just do a quick vote. I don't hear any. So Liz, we'll leave it in your jurisdiction. If it's feasible, we'll take your word for it. If it's not, we'll take your word for it. That's it. Okay. All right. Let's see, Gina, was that it? Okay. All right, we'll move into our other report, Office of EMS and Trauma. David, will that be you today? Oh, Renee's online? Okay, welcome Renee. I can't see you, but.
Our report starts in 101 in your document. Since our last common commission meeting, we've had renewal season for our medics. I think everyone have licensed medics to run calls. It was actually good this year that we kept most of our workforce, which we were slightly concerned because of COVID that there would be some people not renewing their license because they were like done, out. But we actually didn't lose it. Yeah, can I hear me?
Oh,
Can
That's
you all,
probably better
can you all
than-
hear David? Can somebody give me a read on the volume
Yeah.
in Zoom world?
it's hard
Yes.
to hear.
Yes, we can hear him.
Oh, great. Okay, he's moving closer to the mic.
So that was one of our things is the licensing that just got renewed. So again, that was a good thing. Again, we were concerned about COVID and how many medics would not renew, but it was actually on par with other years. So that was actually a really good sign. And we still have people getting licensed all the time. The other thing I want to point out is I think it's the third bullet on our report is Train Georgia. This is the state's learning management system now for EMS. So I know we've had some conversations about this, but this is live now. We've had multiple agencies saying that they want to start putting courses on. We are offering this to other state agencies as well. So we've actually got like the Department of Human Services, the GBI which they actually do some human trafficking stuff that they want to put on. And so this is actually available to the Trauma Commission as well as for them to use this course. There is no charge for the system as far as other state agencies go. We actually, absorb the cost of that. But the benefit of the system is we've already done training now for our agencies that want to be what we call course provider organizations. So if they want to put on their own course, so we've had a lot of agencies say, well, we want to put our protocols, like a protocol course on there. So when they get a new hire, EMT or paramedic, they can put them through the course, they give them a test, and it's all online. And we automatically put that onto their training record in our licensing system. So again, that's available. We already had, as of a few minutes ago when I ran the report, 248 hours of completed education, and we turned it on March 3rd or something, whatever that day was. But so it's actually been used. It's great. And the beauty of this training of the train system is it's the Public Health Foundation. So this is a national thing. Other states use this. In fact, we've actually some other states allow their courses to be seen by other states. And so some of the courses, when we flipped the switch on day one, we had one course that we created, but we had 28 courses that we were able to find from other states that we approved for EMS continuing education. So it's a great system. It's a collaborative system. And again, other state agencies can do this. And I've heard several times mentioned that there'd be some different training. So Dr. Wallace mentioned some stuff, and Dr. Ashley, you did as well, as far as whether it's administrative orientations. And we had the intention from the start of, and this is why we wanted the system, is to be able to put, if you are a new trauma program director or a new trauma program medical director, that you can go to this system and take these courses that prepare you for the job that you have just been voluntold in some cases to do. And so that's again what the system allows for. So if there's questions on that, I would love to take that. The other thing I wanted to address, Courtney talked about this earlier, is the blood products. Just so everybody's clear, the national scope of practice does not include administration of blood. And so the reason that our medical directors advisory council said this needs to be an above and beyond skill is because paramedics are not normally trained on that. That is not in their initial education program. So for safety purposes, they said regular paramedics can keep the bag that's already been hung, right? And they can discontinue it, obviously, if there's a transfusion reaction, but only the medics that have the additional training could administer additional units. And Jesse and her group up there has a great program going on where we kind of modified that for a pilot project for them, where they're actually administering plasma in the field. And I'm not going to steal her thunder. She does a great job on that. But that's one of the things that we can do with that. What we want to do, and Courtney and I talked about this the other day, is all of these skills that do require that additional training, whether it's advanced ventilator skills or it's blood product administration, or for the cardiac side of the house, the ECMO transports and stuff like that, is having someone, because we've had a lot of agencies do those. And Courtney, I checked, it's 19 agencies as of today that have had the blood products. But we want to look at the trainings that they've created and actually get some of them to create the modules so we can put that on Train Georgia. So that a new agency's kind of level of, we got to get everybody trained, is much easier because it's already online and it's already been vetted, it's already been approved for that. I think that's all I got. I'll take any questions, and then I want to let Renee talk about the other things that are on there about the new trauma centers and stuff.
So that project you just made, that's online now?
The Train Georgia?
The train,
Yeah,
about the blood, so you could like.
Oh, no, not the blood. That's what we're going to get them to create.
Okay, so
Yeah,
you
but
could.
the Train Georgia is available.
Okay. Well, that would solve the licensing problem or the national thing. If you could have a course you could take online and say, yes, I've checked off.
Yeah, you still have to have an agency module because you're going to have to go over your specific stuff and get your medical director to sign off. But at least that first part of that education could be done online.
So it's not like they have to go to school for a year to get this stuff done, or go fly to Washington or something.
Yeah.
That would be very helpful.
Again, that's why we wanted that learning management system, to be able to put courses on like that.
Okay. Very good.
Any other questions about that? Because I want to let Renee talk about the others.
Thanks, David. Okay, Renee.
Okay, good afternoon. Can you hear me? All right.
We can hear you very well. Thank you. Go
Okay.
ahead.
Well, we've been extremely busy. There's a lot of activity going on since, things are opening up a little bit now with COVID and we can get back in the facilities. It's still a little bit of a struggle scheduling visits. I need site reviewers for a lot of the rural areas in particular. But I wanted to say we've had 3 of the ACS visits this year, the virtual visits. And congratulations to Kennestone on their verification as a level 2. And Grady received their re-verification as a level 1 during that process. Scottish Rite is awaiting their report, but they've had their visit. And all went very well. I was very impressed with the way the college did the virtual visits, and it seemed to be, the consensus that it worked well, but there was not consensus on whether or not that would be the standard of how they wanted to do visits from this point on. A lot of them still like the in-person, especially on new verifications, and I think it does sort of lack that that part of being able to see face-to-face. You can definitely, for those of you who've been on visits, you can definitely judge some reactions to some of the answers based on body language that you cannot get on that virtual visit. But it's just good to make those contacts. So those are going well. It's almost an ever-changing, and when I say almost weekly, that things are changing as far as the ACS scheduling some visits that need to be done. We've got 2 of our level 1 centers that are awaiting ACS verification visits, and both of those, one is a confirmed date and the other one is trying to confirm a date. We still have several of our level 2s that have had consults, but not the ACS verification visits, and those are being scheduled as we speak. A lot of those are in the works for setting those dates. We have our 3s and 4s that we're catching up on their state visits. And also we have a lot of new interest. I've been working with several centers, probably 2 that will be in Region 4 before the year is out. We've been working very close with Phoebe on pursuing their level 2 and working with them on getting prepared for that. We've got quite a bit of other interest. We have 2 more military bases that we will be participating with visits on, and that's sort of ramping up as well. The biggest hurdle on that is just approval of the registry program, even though it's already been approved for one of our visits. One of our facilities, you still have to go through a lot of paperwork to get state approved or get the military approval of state registry. And so that's part of the process on that we're continuing with. We've done quite a bit of tabletop visits with several facilities, just helping them get on track, and then also informing them of the process for designation. I'm very interested in the rural work group. I guess I've just kind of missed the communication of when those meetings are taking place, but there's a lot of things that are going on our end that group is talking about. And I think I have quite a bit that I could participate with that group and letting them know where we're at on some of these facilities and where we're moving forward, because we have done quite a bit of direct communication with some of these rural hospitals and already have a lot of that information that they were discussing earlier. So I'll be happy to, to participate in that and share the information that we already have from our office. Other than that, I'm preparing a new list of the trauma centers, and hopefully Liz can help me with the map. She did a great job in helping me update one of the maps earlier, but have that new information posted out as soon as I'm sort of dragging my feet to wait for the final summary for one of our hospitals. But I'll have the new list and maps out soon. And again, we have some new facilities that should be coming on within the next 90 days. So I'm excited about those, and I'm open for questions.
Okay, any questions for Renee? Sounds like y'all been busy, Renee.
It's been very busy. I don't know if Marie had anything else to add with registry.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for letting me speak. No, I've been just working closely with Gina on the GQuip data analysis and the time to metrics. I worked with Danlin. I want to give a plug for Danlin. She was able to pull the scene time analysis from the data, and we have that report from her, and we'll be sharing that with Gina next week.
Like I said a while ago, Marie, we appreciate your hard work on that. I know you spent a lot of time with Gina and Liz, so it was, it's really interesting and helpful to see that data, come forth. So thanks for participating, being willing to do that.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
Okay, Renee, anything else?
No, I think we're good. And if there's anyone on here with any of the trauma centers that are interested in assisting me with visits, I think I've corralled most of the trauma coordinators, but I'm especially needing emergency room physicians and some of the trauma medical directors if they're interested. And if they are, let me know and I'll share with them the process. Most of you should have gotten something several months back, and several people have signed up, but I can refresh your memory.
Okay, very good.
Thank you.
Thanks, Renee. Thanks, Marie. All right, that concludes our OEMS&T report. So now we'll move into old business, which there was a request at the last meeting for possibly the Attorney General representative to be here. Dan Walsh, who is no stranger to this group. Dan and I, we've been together a while now, I think. So
Good to see you again.
good to see you, Dan. Thanks for coming.
Should he move up so that they can hear him?
Yeah, you want to come up, Dan, just have a seat, make yourself comfortable. So I'll just open it up to the commission and whoever is left on the phone, I can't see, so I'll just, Aaron obviously can tell who's on the phone. If there's any questions or any old business, then now's the time to ask.
I think Dr. Smith had to leave.
Dr. Smith?
Jay Smith had to leave.
Okay.
Well, I guess I'm the reason that you're here.
Okay.
So, is that a motion? So I'm just confused. We just had a gentleman who left the organization, and I was involved in hiring him, but I don't have too much information about why he left. So I don't know what the DPH rules are about HR and how much impact we can have, should have, what's appropriate, what's not. But I felt like I was kind of out in the dark.
I understand. I think, I'm not in a position today to answer a specific question as to that situation. But I did understand that what's involved in being assigned to another department might be subject to discussion. And I can give a general overview of what the Georgia statute provides on what it means to be assigned to another agency. It's not going to be specific to that particular issue, so I'll leave it to the group of interest.
To me, that might be a better way to answer it, is to, as an attached agency, what freedoms do we perhaps have or not have? I don't know. The state tends to be a little bit more bureaucracy than I'm used to in my life. Some of those, they have some places in back on me, maybe not so much. I'm trying to determine, at least, I was around when they set it up, and I helped actually write some of the language, but so at least had the opinion in myself that perhaps an attached agency, that the legislators set that up so that they could have a little more freedom to do things a little bit more flexible, a little bit quicker, a little bit innovative, if you will. And I'm just trying to get a better handle of whether I'm wrong.
Okay, well, the Georgia statute on the assignment of an agency to a department, and that's how they use it. So just for discussing it, when I say agency, I would be referring to the Trauma Commission And then department is the department to which it's assigned, which is Department of Public Health, and that's provided for in 3111-101A. And that provision that assigns the Trauma Commission to Department of Public Health refers to, it says for administrative purposes, and it refers to another statute, just the general assignment of agency statute, which is 50-4-3 of the Georgia Code. And there are a couple of areas where that's being, what that statute does really is it says here's what the, and here's what the administrative agency that's been assigned, here's its, its responsibilities, and here's what the department is. But some of that is, goes back to the particular statutory authority of the particular agency involved. So, you look at budget as one area where they address it. And they say the assigned agency does prepare its own budget and submits it through the department. And then the department would include the agency's budgetary request as part of its budget, but separate. So included in the department's budget, but separated out. As far as staff goes, what the statute says is that the assigned agency hires its own personnel if authorized by law. And here there is a provision in the Trauma Commission statute, in one statute that kind of sets forth all the duties and responsibilities of the statute that provides a list. And that's 3111-102. And paragraph 11 says the commission is authorized to employ and manage staff to fulfill its. And on that, it does allow the department, again, the department to which it's assigned here, the public health, to provide staff for the agency. And it says subject then back to the provision about the agency being able to hire staff. And then really in addition, there's a provision in 54.3, again, the assigning statute, that talks about the assigned agency still being able to make independent policy decisions. And I think I've always considered that to be a little bit more on the substantive aspects so that you have those independent policy decisions. As far then as how it would relate to a particular instance, that's something that I would, I would need to know the facts, and it would have to be, applying a straightforward statute law is always a little bit more, detailed. So, but that's a general overview of what it means to be assigned to a department.
I can't tell you that I'm a lot sure. I may be the only one that has the fog on their glasses. And I don't know that there is. I'm not saying that there is necessary complete clarity on all of this.
Yeah, I mean, I guess as far as the specific situation you outlined, I can't really off the cuff give an answer to that. And it's always been a lot of departments' policy to advise an agency or provide something like that. We would want, a written request that would, so we have a clear understanding of the facts and wouldn't miss something in advising you. And we want to make sure we're answering the question that you have and not generally. So all I can really do today is kind of give you that overview that, the department, the Trauma Commission is clearly assigned to the Department of Public Health, and there's a statute that kind of separates out the responsibilities of the agency and the department, and where that fits in a specific circumstance. I would probably need to just understand the facts a little bit better.
There's no.
Yeah, exactly.
It's beyond my capabilities today.
Well,
I'm not, please don't think I'm picking on you. I'm just, I still remain confused as to clear delineation of authority. And what we should and shouldn't. Like I say, I've been talking to the legislators that were involved with, that their concept was that they want to give it to a group of people who had a passion for trauma and who would focus on trauma, and sometimes my favorite words are like this drift, and not drift away from the mission. So that's what I kind of like for us to at least feel like we remain focused on trauma. And we can certain things with that. There we are. I don't know that, still don't know that I have the answer to my question, but I'll be very honest with you, I still don't know that I want to go to the point to ask him a specific question, because I don't like asking specific questions of attorneys. They give specific answers. Therein lies the devil in the detail. So,
And I can say on your last point about remaining focused on the mission, and I'll just read from the statute, hopefully this will provide some guidance on that, that an agency assigned to a department for administrative purposes only shall exercise its quasi-judicial, rulemaking, licensing, or policymaking functions independently of the department.
boy, I like that statement.
So that is, maybe unclear if I just read what somebody else said, but that is in the statute. I can email you that.
I think that's important. I think that provides us some significant protection.
That is, to me,
Yeah.
that's a significant statement.
Okay, thanks, Dan. Appreciate it.
Seeing everybody here.
Okay, says here new business. I don't have anything new. I think we've covered everything. Anybody got anything new? All right, can I get a motion to adjourn?
Motion. Oh, wait. You need to decide
You don't
if
have to
we
vote.
don't take the, okay, we don't have to vote on the time. You wanted to up the time to the meeting.
Yeah,
If we
that's-
stick with our original time. I just want everybody in agreement.
Oh, you mean about the time of the
The
meeting
start
in
time.
general?
Yeah.
Well,
Oh,
not
so I do
general,
have a new business.
But for
Thanks
the
for
next
bringing-
Well, it's not
meeting,
really
yeah.
business, you don't have to vote on.
We don't have to vote on it.
Yeah.
I'll just throw this out since you're here. Would there be any trepidation to, like, for me, having a meeting from 11 to 1, which is now 1:40, is like right in the middle of lunch without a lunch meeting, which, so it's, you can't really eat before because it's too early. So anyway, that's a little bit of a logistics issue. But then again, having it right in the middle, I can't get any work done in the morning because I got to get here, and then I can't get any work done. So it really, the 2.5 hour meeting is a whole day for me. And I guess, we
Yeah.
come the farthest.
Yeah.
So this is for discussion. How would y'all feel about having a meeting earlier in the morning, like say 9:30? I guess, or either have it in the afternoon, but then you get into Atlanta traffic issue. I know there's the people in Atlanta, there's the Atlanta traffic issue. So any thoughts on that? I would rather have it earlier, a little bit earlier to where we're sort of done and can get on the road if that's we want to do it, or at least have part of the day to either get some work done besides just the commission.
I'm in favor of that. I don't know if I have to travel the farthest. I don't, it's between me and Courtney and Vic. I don't know wherever else anybody else is, but I'm okay with.
I'll meet you down 16, we can race.
That's right. We're not gonna go very fast with the construction, I can tell you that right now. I'm okay with whatever time you want to meet, including 8 o'clock in the morning. I don't mind getting up at 5 and coming here, whatever you need to do. But I agree with you. It allows me to get some more work done in the afternoon. So I'm in favor of moving the time up as well. So.
What about 9 then? Would that work?
So if we
Or
don't.
Regina comes from Augusta. I forgot about that. That's a
Oh,
little
yeah,
drive for you,
that's
too.
fine.
If we're not able to attach on to St. Simon's, we'll just move this time up for the following Thursday that's already scheduled to 9 o'clock then.
Right.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay, not to muddy the waters. I'm sorry, I'll keep my mouth shut, moving forward, but what time would you like to meet if you meet in?
Anytime on Thursday before 7 p.m.
Yeah, well, at least St. Simon's is flexible if we do it then, because we'll be coming in for the meeting and something.
Yeah.
So we don't have to meet at 9.
Right.
Well, but there might, just depending on availability, so.
Yeah, it comes down to availability of rooms, right? That's the office. So.
But I mean, she's asking, can we be flexible on the
yeah.
Thursday with the time if we're moving forward? You don't want to assume that we want to meet at 9 o'clock on
Yeah, no.
that Thursday.
No, that's
right.
Yeah, she was asking, do we want to meet at 9 on that
No.
Thursday?
I think for that day,
We'll talk
if we could
offline.
come in the morning and meet me after, that would be much more
Yeah, I
reasonable.
think so, yeah.
Then you wouldn't have to take
And,
that
and I'm,
Wednesday night off.
and I'm okay with if you can make that meeting time work anytime during that day, I'm okay. Ideally, afternoon would be better for what Dr. Ashley just mentioned, but I'm okay with doing it anytime.
It's all about Dr. John.
It is. And how is that different? How is that
Yeah,
different?
you're right.
Okay, well, let's see then what we come up with. All right, now can I get a motion to adjourn?
Motion? To adjourn.
I'm gonna second it. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
We're out of here. Thank you all.